Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christa Baker Alexander. Christa Anne Baker was born on November 27, 1983, in Laurel and Jones County, Mississippi, to Pastor Winfred Baker and Paty Anne Baker. She was the youngest of 3 children, with 2 older brothers. When Christa was 8 years old, her family moved to Abota Springs, Louisiana, where they built a church and actively participated in its activities. Growing up, Christa traveled extensively with Christian missionary organizations to help those in need, particularly children. She was homeschooled and later pursued a degree in Christian education through online courses at the North Tennessee Bible Institute. Christa's passion was serving others, especially children, and she hoped to start her own family one day. However, her faith took priority, and she dreamed of finding a husband who shared her values. Christa adhered to traditional values and chose to save herself for marriage, only dating with the intention of finding a lifelong partner. During this time, she developed close friendships, including one with Christa Alexander, a fellow youth pastor who shared her passion for missionary work. Christa was a charismatic and well-liked individual in his community. Their families met through the church and maintained a good relationship. Christa had been friends with Christa for many years before he asked her father, Winfred Baker, for permission to marry her. Her father happily agreed. During their courtship, Christa and Christa followed church traditions and refrained from intimate contact. Christa had even told her parents that she wanted to save her first kiss with Christa for their wedding day. While Christa helped her parents at church, Christa was pursuing a career as a paramedic. A year later, they decided to get married. On March 1, 2008, they exchanged vows in front of their families and church members. The wedding was a joyful celebration, and Christa was a beautiful bride. However, their happiness was short-lived. Just 4 months after the wedding, tragedy struck. On June 29, 2008, Christa returned home from a night shift at around 6 a.m. to find Christa lying face down on the floor. She was dead. Christa immediately called the police. Christa's body was found near the front door, with no signs of a struggle. A bullet wound was discovered in the back of her head, with burn marks on her skin, indicating that the shot was fired at close range. The gunshot wound suggested that the gun was positioned at the back of Christa's head when the shot was fired. A 9mm shell casing was found on the floor next to her body. Initially, investigators thought the crime might have been a botched robbery. It was possible that someone broke into the house, assuming it was empty, and then killed Christa to avoid leaving a witness. Police had thoroughly searched the house. A jewelry box was found on the bed, the gun cabinet had been forced open, and Christa's purse was on the kitchen table, showing signs of having been rummaged through. Additionally, many drawers and cabinets were left open, suggesting that the perpetrator was looking for something of value. After completing their search of the house, police began interviewing individuals who had access to the property. Christa's husband, Christa Alexander, was the first person they spoke with. However, he was too distraught to answer questions immediately, and investigators had to wait for him to compose himself. Once he was able to speak, Christa reported that everything had seemed normal the previous night before he left for his overnight shift as an emergency medical technician with Cadan ambulance. He told that he called Christa multiple times throughout the night, but she didn't answer her phone. He also sent her several text messages, which she didn't respond to. Assuming she was just tired and had fallen asleep, he didn't think much of it. However, when he returned home the next morning, he was met with a disturbing scene. The front door was slightly open, and upon entering, he found their belongings scattered everywhere and Christa lying on the floor with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. He immediately checked her pulse and confirmed that she was dead. Panicked, he called 911 right away. The investigators were tasked with determining who could have entered the house while he was at work. It was possible that the perpetrator waited until Christa was alone before striking. They also explored the possibility that Christa may have let the killer into the house herself, as there were no signs of a struggle on her body or in the house. This suggested that she may have known her attacker and didn't feel threatened until it was too late. Paty informed the investigators that a rifle and a shotgun were missing from the gun cabinet. What made the situation even more tragic was that Christa was 17 weeks pregnant, meaning that not only had he lost his wife, but also their unborn child. Paty was overcome with grief and struggled to come to terms with the loss, unsure of how to move forward with his life. The case involved 2 victims, not one. The crime scene appeared unusual to investigators. The house was messy, but it didn't seem like the result of a typical burglary. Cabinets and drawers were open, but there was no evidence of rummaging or searching for specific items. It was as if the perpetrator wanted to mislead the police. The jewelry box was also open, but the jewelry was still intact, which raised suspicions. Christa's purse was open, yet all its valuable contents remained. The police noted that 2 firearms were missing from the house, but this was unusual because there were more firearms in the house that were not taken. This led investigators to wonder why the perpetrator didn't take all the available firearms. Based on these observations, investigators concluded that the crime scene was staged. It appeared that the perpetrator intended to kill Christa Alexander and then make it look like a robbery. As a result, the police began interviewing their neighbors to gather more information. This led to an unexpected lead in the case. Mavis Rabel, the 69-year-old neighbor and was landlord of the Alexanders, described they as quiet and recently married. They were active members of the Fundamental Baptist Church. Mavis remembered Christa Alexander as a kind and helpful woman who rarely went outside without her husband. Mavis last saw they on Saturday afternoon when Paty Alexander was collecting the bodies of turtles he had shot in his backyard pond. This led investigators to discover that Paty owned the gun. However, when police searched the Alexanders' home, they did not find a gun. Paty claimed that only a rifle and a shotgun had been stolen from the house, but he never mentioned a handgun. Detectives suspected that Paty might be hiding something. They searched the pond area and found several 9mm shell casings in the grass. These casings were similar to the one found near Christa's body. The police sent the casings to the state crime lab for analysis. The lab report confirmed that the gun Paty used to shoot the turtles was the same gun used to shoot Christa. Investigators summoned Paty to the police station for further questioning regarding his wife's death. He maintained that it was impossible for him to have committed the crime. Paty explained that he had left for work at 5 p.m. on Saturday, June 28, 2008, and returned home the next morning at 6 a.m., providing an alibi that he was working throughout the night. Upon verification, Paty's colleagues corroborated his claim, stating that he was indeed present at work all night. When inquired about the firearm, Paty revealed that he owned a gun but claimed to have sold it the day prior to the incident to an unknown man named Steve. The alleged buyer had paid $500 in cash, which made verifying this claim difficult. According to Paty, Steve was described as a white male in his mid-30s, around 6 feet 1 inch tall, driving an old Toyota pickup truck. Christa's parents shared their concerns with investigators, stating that they didn't believe Paty's account of events. Her father, Winfred Baker, noted that Paty showed little emotional response to Christa's death, a behavior that had started a few months before their wedding. They had been experiencing financial difficulties since moving in together, and the impending arrival of their child was likely to add to their struggles. Christa's parents also suspected that Paty was having an affair with a colleague who had even attended their wedding. Christa had confided in friends just weeks before her death that she suspected Paty was cheating on her. As investigators dug deeper into the marriage, they became increasingly convinced that Paty and Christa had different visions for their future. However, Was this enough motive for Cootie to take Christa's life, especially given that she was carrying their unborn child? The police had one lead, a man named Steve, who Cootie claimed had bought the gun used to kill Christa. Investigators set out to find Steve, using the description provided by Cootie. Meanwhile, they brought Cootie in for further questioning, asking him to provide a detailed account of his activities before, during, and after work on the day of Christa's death. This time, his story differed from his initial statement. The investigators found several inconsistencies in Cootie's story. He failed to mention a man named Steve, who was allegedly at his house, and to whom he had sold a gun. Additionally, while on duty, Cootie showed no concern for his pregnant wife Christa's well-being when she didn't answer his calls, despite knowing she was home alone. He could have asked a family member to check on her, but didn't. Furthermore, the crime scene appeared to have been staged, which raised suspicions about Cootie's involvement. As the investigators applied pressure, Cootie's story began to unravel. After several hours of interrogation, he changed his story entirely. He claimed that he had been sleeping on the couch before his night shift and that his wife had woken him up late. He stated that he wasn't angry with her for waking him up late and that it wasn't an issue. Cootie then explained that he had been walking around the house with a gun, intending to take it to work because a colleague was interested in buying it. He said he was fooling around, aiming the gun at objects and making click, click noises. He approached Christa from behind, put the gun to the back of her head, and claimed that an accidental shot occurred. He maintained that it was an accident and that he didn't intend to harm her. When he realized Christa was dead, he was scared and didn't know what to do. Cootie Alexander admitted to staging a crime scene to make it look like a robbery. He took several items from his house, including weapons and a DVD player, and drove to work with the front door left open. His plan was for someone to discover the open door and lights on, and then find his wife, Christa, while he was at work. However, this plan failed. On his way to work, Alexander threw a pistol and other items, including his wife's jewelry, out of the car window. By the time he arrived at work, the only items left in the car were a DVD player and a Sony radio. He gave the DVD player to a colleague, Allison Sharp, with whom he had been having an affair. Alexander and Sharp kissed and held hands before and after his wedding, spending one night at a Baton Rouge hotel. While his wife Christa was at church camp, he took Sharp to a hotel for a jacuzzi evening with fine china plates, meal and wine, amidst supposed financial difficulties with his low salary of $11 per hour and stalled professional certification efforts. County and his pregnant wife, Christa, were struggling financially and unemployed, and on top of that, their washing machine had broken. But Alexander managed to come up with money for a romantic evening at Callaway Inn with his mistress, Sharp. Police later determined that a shocking act unfolded in the home, contradicting Cootie's initial claim that Christa's death was accidental. Detectives found it difficult to prove direct involvement, but believed Cootie's explanation was suspicious. Despite the challenges, police were convinced that Christa's death was not an accident, and Cootie's actions raised more questions than answers. After the police arrested Cootie Alexander, Christa's parents were able to find the strength to forgive him. The Baker family came together to mourn the loss of their beloved daughter and what would have been their fourth grandchild. Christa's father, Winfred Baker, remembered her fondly, saying, "She was a sweet and lovely person." Christa had made a significant impact on those around her, having completed 17 mission trips during her lifetime. Winfred Baker recalled a conversation he had with Cootie shortly before his arrest. Although it was brief, Baker described the encounter as emotional, saying, "We hugged and cried together." Despite his desire for justice, Baker stated that he had already forgiven Cootie. "We forgave him even before we knew who was responsible," he said. Baker found comfort in knowing that Christa was now in a better place, saying, "She's with the Lord, in heaven, and at peace." The trial started on August 2, 2009. Prosecutors claimed that Coody's behavior after Christa's death implied that he had acted on purpose. They wondered why he didn't call 911 right away if the shooting was truly an accident. Instead, Coody faked a robbery and left Christa's body for 12 hours before going home and calling 911. Prosecutors also questioned Coody's story that the shooting was accidental, noting that he was an experienced gun owner who had received proper training from his father. Coody Alexander, 24, was charged with second-degree murder for the death of his wife, Christa. Coody had admitted to being involved in her death, which he claimed was a result of his poor decision-making. After initially going to trial, Coody suddenly changed his plea to guilty, ending jury deliberations. This unexpected turn of events came about when Christa's family agreed to a plea deal that had been proposed earlier. Alexander was sentenced to 55 years in prison in August 2009. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jennifer Brown. Jennifer Brown was born in 1979, radiated positivity and warmth, impacting those around her. Her numerous pursuits often left friends and family wondering how she managed it all, but her true passion was being a mother. Despite having to care for Noah, her son, this has not negatively affected her life. Instead, make Jennifer stronger, especially after Noah was diagnosed with autism as a child. As she cared for Noah, Jennifer became his rock and closest friend. They spent countless hours together, sharing joyful moments and supporting each other through life's challenges. Their heartwarming bond evoked feelings of tenderness and admiration from those who knew them. The small town adored this family for their genuine kindness and cheerful nature. Tragedy struck unexpectedly on January 3, 2023, when Jennifer vanished without leaving behind any clues. On January 4, 2023, Antonio Blair Watts Richardson contacted the Limerick Township Police Department, deeply concerned about his close friend Jennifer's disappearance. Although it had been less than 24 hours since he last saw or heard from her, Antonio's anxiety was growing by the minute. Despite numerous attempts, he couldn't reach Jennifer, which was unusual since she was always responsive, especially when it came to her son Noah. Jennifer's family and friends knew her as a devoted mother and caring person, making her sudden disappearance alarming. Antonio's call to the police initiated a lengthy and mysterious investigation. A massive search effort began, involving police officers, family, and friends, all hoping to find clues about Jennifer's disappearance. The main question on everyone's mind was what could have caused Jennifer to leave her son without explanation. At 4 p.m., Officer Stephen Crawford from the Limerick Township Police Department visited the Brown family home to check on the situation. He observed Jennifer's vehicle parked near the porch. Upon entering the house, he found her keys, purse, tablet, and work cell phone still inside. However, Jennifer's personal cell phone was nowhere to be found. When police attempted to track the phone, they discovered it had been turned off at 7 a.m. on January 4th and the signal couldn't be traced after that. The last known location of the phone was near the intersection of Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick. This discovery marked the first significant lead in the investigation and indicated that something ominous had occurred. As a result, Jennifer was officially reported missing, and the police launched an investigation. Investigators questioned Jennifer's family, friends, and neighbors, but none of them had any information about her disappearance. Her loved ones, including her Aunt Diane Brem and Jennifer's friends Tiffany Barron and Antonio, were adamant that Jennifer would never leave her son behind. As a devoted mother, she would never abandon her child. Despite efforts, no leads were found in Jennifer's disappearance. Her family appealed to the public and a reward was offered for information, but yielded nothing, leaving unanswered questions and growing anxiety. The police investigation started by examining the events of that day, focusing on Jennifer's close friend Antonio, who was the last person to see her alive. On what seemed like an ordinary January day, Jennifer and Antonio spent time in the living room discussing life, future plans, and their children. As their kids often played together, Jennifer asked Antonio to pick up her son Noah from school. Antonio agreed and headed to the school to get Noah. The next day, however, Noah's behavior at school raised concerns among his teachers. They noticed that he had missed 2 doses of his medication, which was unusual given Jennifer's diligent care for her son's condition. She always kept his teachers informed about his health and any issues that arose at school. The school staff became concerned when they couldn't reach Jennifer. Noah told them Jennifer had gone to the grocery store but hadn't returned. She would never leave her son alone at this time. Antonio also tried to contact her but was unsuccessful. Antonio reported her missing to the police. As the investigation continued, no new information about Jennifer's whereabouts emerged. Hope for her return began to fade with each passing day. It seemed she had vanished without a trace and might never be found. However, on January 18th, 2 weeks after her disappearance was reported, 2 warehouse employees in nearby Limmer Township stumbled upon something unusual. They exited the building to grab coffee and stumbled upon what seemed to be a freshly dug hole. Upon closer inspection, they were shocked to find a woman's body buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately notified the police, who promptly arrived at the scene. The body was identified as Jennifer Brown, who had been missing for 2 weeks. The sheriff informed Jennifer's family that her body had been found partially buried near a warehouse in Rosefort. An autopsy revealed that Jennifer's death was caused by asphyxiation, with 3 broken ribs indicating a violent struggle with her killer. The investigation shifted from a missing person case to a murder case. Police re-interviewed Jennifer's family and friends, but these conversations yielded no new leads. The investigation seemed to be reaching a dead end, with no suspects in sight. However, just when detectives thought they had hit a roadblock, an unexpected lead emerged from an unforeseen source. After Jennifer's disappearance and murder were made public, the police asked anyone with relevant information to come forward. Noah's teacher responded to this request. She remembered an incident that initially seemed insignificant but raised serious concerns after Jennifer's death. The teacher reported that Noah shared an important detail about the day Jennifer disappeared. Noah told his teacher that when Antonio picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, he saw his mom's personal cell phone among Antonio's belongings. Noah recognized the phone because the lock screen showed his own childhood photo. This information proved crucial in the investigation into Jennifer's murder. Previously, investigators suspected that Jennifer's killer had taken her phone. Now, Antonio became the main suspect. The police started investigating the relationship between Jennifer and Antonio, uncovering surprising details. Initially, Jennifer and Antonio's friendship appeared strong and enduring. They spent a significant amount of time together, were well acquainted, and their families socialized with one another. However, once the financial dealings between them became known, one that had been concealed behind their seemingly friendly relationship. Antonio owned a restaurant called Bird's Kitchen, which had declined and closed in early 2022. Following this, Antonio sought help from Jennifer in August 2022. To support her friend, Jennifer decided to invest in Antonio's business, helping him reopen Bird's Kitchen in a new location. They signed a contract that required Jennifer to provide regular financial support to sustain the restaurant, making payments approximately every 6 weeks. To rebuild Bird's Kitchen, Jennifer gave Antonio approximately $36,000 from August to January. They agreed she would give him another $99,000. Antonio was supposed to find a new location, pay rent, sign a contract, and reopen the restaurant in January 2023. However, Antonio spent the money on personal needs instead of the business. As a result, the property owners canceled their agreement with him on December 26, 2022, because he failed to meet his financial obligations. This left Antonio in a difficult situation, losing both money and the opportunity to open the restaurant. The police suspected Antonio of committing a crime to save his business due to his desperate situation. Upon investigating Jennifer's iPad, they found 2 unauthorized transfers of $177,000 to Bertie's Kitchen on January 3rd. These transfers were not part of the agreement between Jennifer and Antonio, and they initially failed due to two-factor authentication, which was later disabled. This evidence increasingly implicated Antonio in her murder. Police interviewed the owners of the property where Antonio lived, who had recently terminated his lease. Surprisingly, on January 4th, the same day Antonio reported Jennifer missing, he had met with them, claiming he had the money to sign a new lease. This led investigators to believe that Antonio was likely the killer, but they knew he would not confess easily. They needed concrete evidence to prove his guilt. To gather more information, investigators spoke with Antonio's wife, Tiara Taylor. They asked her about Antonio's whereabouts on the day Jennifer went missing. Tiara told them that Antonio had visited the Brown family at around 1 p.m. on January 3rd and didn't return home until 4:30 a.m. the next morning, when he picked up Noah from the bus stop. She also mentioned that Antonio came home briefly, then left again around 5 p.m. and didn't return until late that night. This timeline became a crucial focus point for further investigation. Further investigation found that Antonio spent the night with his mistress, Tatiana Garrett, and didn't meet her until 8 p.m. This left a 3-hour gap with no alibi. Based on evidence, detectives created a timeline of the murder. According to them, Antonio went to Jennifer's house on January 3rd around 1 p.m. and allegedly killed her while Noah was at school. Antonio then transferred funds from Jennifer's iPad to his account and left to pick up Noah from the bus stop around 4 p.m. Later, he returned to Jennifer's house, dropped off Noah, and went back to dispose of the body. He buried it in a shallow grave in a field near Roseford. Afterwards, he went to Tatiana's house and spent the night. Everything seemed carefully planned, but one mistake led the police to Antonio. The mistake was letting Noah see his mother's cell phone. The police had enough evidence to convict him but investigated further to confirm his guilt. This involved film experts and a trained dog that could detect cadaveric odors indoors. First, the dog was taken to Jennifer's home to familiarize itself with her scent. This was the same location where the crime had occurred, in her kitchen. The police then led the dog to Antonio's car, where it immediately picked up the same scent. This final piece of evidence solidified the detectives' suspicions of Antonio's involvement in the murder. After months of investigation, Antonio was arrested on February 8th and charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and theft. He is currently being held at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without bail, awaiting a preliminary hearing where he will face the law for his alleged crimes. Jennifer's loved ones were devastated by her death, especially since the killer was someone they trusted. Now that the killer has been brought to justice, the case was finally closed. The boys' observation of the killer's mistake played a crucial role in uncovering the truth and bringing the perpetrator to justice. The tragic events in Limer Township serve as a reminder that even the most meticulously planned crimes will ultimately be solved. Cruel and inhumane acts will not go unpunished, and those responsible will face the law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christine Marie Paulia. Once a bright and promising student, Christine became embroiled in a web of tragedy and despair. Her story serves as a cautionary tale, highlighting the dangers of unaddressed mental health challenges, peer pressure, and the devastating impact of unresolved trauma. Christine Marie Paulia was born on March 31, 1986, on the peaceful shores of Long Island, New York. She was the second child of Laurie and Charles, with her father working as a construction worker and her mother tending to the home. During her early years, Christine was known to be a lively and sociable child, though she could also be shy at times. She shared a close and affectionate relationship with her doting father. Tragically, Christine's life was shattered when her father met an untimely demise in a construction accident, crushed by falling bricks. The sorrow continued to engulf her as she lost her grandfather and great-grandmother soon after. Bereft of her father's comforting presence, Christine's family struggled with grief. Her mother, Laurie, grappling with the weight of her husband's death, found solace in drugs, spiraling into addiction. Unable to provide a stable environment, Laurie lost custody of Christine and her older brother, who found refuge in the care of their grandparents. During her early school years, Christine was diagnosed with alopecia, a condition that caused her to lose her hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes. Each morning, she would find clumps of her hair scattered across her pillow, resulting in bald patches and eventually affecting her eyesight, leading to the loss of her eyebrows and eyelashes. Additionally, she also had poor vision, which required her to wear thick eyeglasses from kindergarten through middle school. Christine endured persistent taunts and bullying from her peers, a relentless assault that severely undermined her self-esteem. Isolated and despondent, she grappled with loneliness and depression. Deprived of the companionship of friends to share her trials and triumphs, her classmates struggled to understand the cause of her thinning hair, leading to persistent teasing and mocking. Despite her attempts to conceal the loss with wigs, often described as bulky and reminiscent of Halloween costumes, she found no respite from the ridicule, further adding to her distress. Her drawn-on eyebrows also drew attention, fueling the mockery she faced, even with the wigs. Her torment persisted, escalating to the point where other children would brazenly remove them. Each morning brought a sense of dread, as Christine faced the uncertainty of which classmate would inflict pain upon her that day, deepening her anguish and resentment towards school. After reuniting with her mother, who had overcome her addiction and remarried, Christine and her family left Long Island behind and relocated to Clear Lake City, Texas, a suburb of Houston. This new environment offered a fresh start for Christine and her siblings. Living in a predominantly upper-middle-class neighborhood and enrolling in Clear Lake High School, Christine prepared herself for the possibility of continued bullying, but fate had other plans. In a turn of events, Christine crossed paths with Rachel Carutis and Tiffany Rowell, two popular girls who welcomed her with open arms and extended their friendship to her. Embracing this opportunity, they took Christine under their wing and initiated a remarkable transformation. With their guidance, Christine underwent a physical makeover, learning how to dress and apply makeup while also acquiring more stylish wigs. This outward change mirrored a profound inner shift as Christine blossomed into a more confident, outgoing, and content individual. With Rachel and Tiffany by her side, Christine effortlessly became part of the social scene at her high school, where she was embraced and admired by her classmates. Her transformed demeanor, brimming with confidence and charm, led to her being crowned Miss Irresistible in 2003, marking a poignant milestone in her journey of self-exploration and personal growth. Rachel and Tiffany exemplified social grace, effortlessly navigating popularity while remaining genuinely kind and inclusive. Rachel, with her flowing locks and captivating smile, exuded intelligence and charisma, considering a future in the United States Air Force alongside her passion for art and childcare. Tiffany, adorned with her radiant smile and boundless generosity, harbored dreams of a career in social work, complemented by her talents as an actress and her vast circle of friends, including her closest confidant, Rachel. Although a year ahead in school, they welcomed Christine into their fold, fostering a deep bond of friendship together. The trio reveled in laughter and camaraderie, with Christine finding solace in their company to the extent of shedding her wig, a symbol of her newfound comfort and happiness, as observed by her delighted mother in the summer of 2003. Rachel and Tiffany, at the age of 18, began a new chapter by moving in together. Meanwhile, Christine, who was 17 years old, remained in her final year of high school and frequently visited the pair. It was during this time that Christine started a relationship with Christopher Lee Snyder, a 21-year-old man. However, Christine's mother, stepfather, as well as Rachel and Tiffany, disapproved of the relationship. Their concerns were rooted in Christopher's history of drug abuse and his extensive criminal record, which included armed robbery. Despite the warnings from her loved ones, Christine continued the relationship, leading them to express their belief that she deserved better. Eventually, Christine found herself treading the same path as her boyfriend, succumbing to the allure of various drugs alongside Christopher. Christine's mother would later describe their relationship as toxic, revealing that Christopher not only isolated her daughter from loved ones, but also subjected her to alleged sexual assault. The couple's dynamic was plagued by intense jealousy, leading to frequent and heated conflicts. One particularly humiliating incident occurred when Christopher brazenly appeared at Christine's school, forcibly removing her wig in a deliberate attempt to shame her in front of classmates. Battling deep-seated insecurities and an unquenchable need for Christopher's attention, Christine became possessively jealous whenever he interacted with other girls. Christopher's family, recognizing the doomed nature of their relationship, pointed to the relentless arguments that plagued the couple. One such dispute escalated to the point where Christine spent an entire night on Christopher's front lawn, issuing threats of violence against his family. The police were frequently called to intervene in Christine's tumultuous relationship, and Christopher allegedly confided in his loved ones that he was truly frightened by only two things: the authorities and Christine herself. Despite the countless fights and clashes, Christine adamantly refused to sever ties with Christopher, a decision that would ultimately lead to devastating consequences. On the afternoon of July 18, 2003, Christopher and Christine visited Tiffany's home with the intention of stealing drugs and money. Tiffany was present with her boyfriend, Marcus Priscilla, his cousin, Adalbert Sanchez, and Tiffany's friend, Rachel. Allegedly, Marcus and his cousin were involved in drug dealing, leading Christopher and Christine to believe that drugs were stored in Tiffany's home. They planned to rob these drugs, and an argument between Christopher and Marcus ensued, resulting in the shooting of all four individuals in the home. Tiffany and Rachel sustained multiple gunshot wounds, including shots to the crotch, indicating a motive of sexual aggravation and jealousy. Adalbert Sanchez, Marcus's cousin, had recently moved to Clear Lake to escape violence, only to be killed in the tragedy shortly after his arrival. Rachel, critically wounded, tried to call for help but was suddenly found by Christine. In a shocking turn of events, Christine repeatedly hit Rachel on the head with the butt of her .38 caliber revolver until Rachel stopped moving. Christine later confessed to the police that Rachel had begged for her life, but Christine had chosen to kill her anyway. Less than an hour after he committed the murders, Christopher drove Christine to her job at Walgreens, where she worked at the makeup counter, and she acted as if nothing had happened. At around 6 p.m., a friend of Tiffany's, who was 18 years old, came to her house to join the group. When she got no response to her knocks, she noticed that Tiffany's and Marcus's vehicles were still parked outside. She became worried, entered the unlocked door, and was met with a horrific scene. Her friends were dead. She immediately fled the scene and called the police. The police characterized the crime scene as excessively brutal, earning the label overkill, due to its horrific nature, initially suspecting it to be linked to drug trafficking. The victims, Tiffany and Rachel, had recently graduated and worked at a strip club, while Marcus was involved in selling cocaine. As a result, the police initially presumed that the crime was orchestrated by professionals connected to the drug trade, given that all the victims, except for Rachel, were killed in a manner consistent with execution-style murders. After the murders, the police launched an investigation, using descriptions of the suspects given by neighbors who had seen them walking to and from the home. The timeline of events showed that the murders took place around 3:25 p.m. Notably, Christine had already clocked into her job before 4 p.m. that same day. Although Christine appeared distressed in front of her family when the murders were announced, she supposedly didn't attend the victim's funeral due to depression. Christine took a significant step towards reforming her life by checking herself into rehab to overcome her drug addiction. Around the same time, Christopher was arrested in Kentucky and put behind bars for unrelated car theft charges, which ultimately led to the demise of their relationship. Nevertheless, the Clear Lake Massacre remained a mystery, unsolved, for 3 long years, despite concerted efforts to crack the case. In 2004, Christine checked herself into a rehab center in Ville, Texas, to overcome her addiction to drugs. It was there that she met Stanley Justin Rott, and a romance developed between them. After completing their treatment programs in 2005, they got married, vowing to stay drug-free together. They used the $360,000 trust fund left by Christine's biological father to start their new life, investing in an apartment. Christine's family had concerns about her marriage, particularly given Stanley's past of allegedly taking advantage of women financially. Christine and Stanley had made a conscious effort to stay away from drugs, but their happiness was short-lived. As the second anniversary of the murders approached in July 2005, the media's renewed focus on the case brought back painful memories for Christine. Rather than mourning the loss of her loved ones, she became increasingly upset by the released suspect sketches. This distress led her to confide in Stanley about her role in the murders, causing the couple to go into hiding in November 2005. Christine and Stanley were living in a San Antonio motel room where they spent the following 8 months regularly using heroin and cocaine. On July 8, 2006, the police received an anonymous tip about the murders. The informant claimed to have been in rehab with Christine and overheard her confessing her involvement in the crime to Stanley. Acting on this information, the police located Christine on July 19, 2006, and placed her under arrest. Stanley was also apprehended after the authorities discovered 70 vials of heroin in their room. While in custody, Stanley disclosed a startling revelation to the police. He alleged that Christine had confessed to him that after the shooting, she encountered Rachel, who was still alive, and proceeded to kill her friend by beating her to death. Christine tried to shift the blame to her ex-boyfriend Christopher during her questioning by the detectives, saying he came up with the plan to rob her friends, which went wrong. She told the police that all she wanted was to get drugs and money and didn't mean to hurt anyone. According to Christine, a fight broke out between Christopher and one of the men there, and shots were fired. She claimed Christopher forced her to pull the trigger by putting his hand over hers. The story that was told about the event was proven to be false by the coroner's reports, which showed that 2 different guns were used. Additionally, Christine admitted to going back to the scene to make sure the victims were dead, and she described a disturbing encounter with her friend Rachel, whom she claimed to have hit multiple times with a gun while Rachel was trying to call for help. Despite possessing this knowledge, Christine's defense attorneys maintained that she had never wielded a firearm and harbored no intention of causing harm. Meanwhile, Christopher, the other perpetrator in the crime, was released from jail. However, upon police entering his residence, they discovered that he had vanished without a trace, even before law enforcement arrived. Reportedly, he had become aware of the warrant for his arrest and the impending capital charges against him. Christopher had apparently moved to South Carolina and started dating a woman he met online. After finding out about the arrest warrant, he allegedly brought back pills and soda from South Carolina. Sadly, his body was later found lifeless in a nearby wooded area, and medical examiners confirmed that the cause of death was an overdose of pills. Inside the safe, police found 2 guns that were later matched to the murders. Christine's husband, Stanley, told the authorities that she had admitted to being involved in the murders, and he agreed to testify against her. His testimony was later confirmed to be true. Christine has never expressed remorse for the killings, nor provided any motive. However, psychiatrist Gail Saltz theorizes that her actions stemmed from envy and jealousy toward her more popular friends. Christopher's sister, Brandy, concurs that jealousy was likely the driving force behind the murders, reflecting on Christine's demeanor and remarking, "I remember her being intensely jealous." There must have been some underlying jealousy between Christine and Rachel. Christine was found guilty of 4 counts of capital murder on October 13, 2008. Despite being a juvenile offender at the time of the crimes, she was spared the death penalty and received a life sentence in prison. Despite filing multiple appeals regarding her sentence, all have been rejected. Christine is currently serving her sentence at the Christina Melton Crane Unit in Gatesville, Texas, and is scheduled for parole eligibility in July 2046, at the age of 60. Christine's downward spiral had devastating consequences, resulting in the loss of innocent lives and leaving the community stunned and grief-stricken. As the community came to terms with the tragedy, they rallied together to pay their respects to those who were taken too soon, and to offer each other comfort and support in the face of unbearable sorrow. The tragic outcome of Christine's story serves as a poignant reminder of the urgent need to prioritize mental health awareness and to provide timely support and intervention to individuals grappling with trauma and mental health problems. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Candy Family Massacre. Imagine the sheer horror a 10-year-old boy would have felt upon waking up in the morning and leaving his room, only to discover that everyone in his family was dead. His father, mother, and 3 older brothers were all lying in a pool of their own blood. The story we will be discussing today is deeply heartbreaking and terrifying, and it may leave you questioning whether the people you love the most are truly safe. Jonathan Candy's family seemed to be a typical American household. Some might even view them as the quintessential all-American family. The family consisted of 2 parents and 4 sons, and on the surface, everything appeared normal. No one would have suspected that anything unusual was happening within the Candy family's home. The darkest part of this story is not even the fact that they were all murdered. It would have been easier and less painful for everyone to understand if a dangerous and armed man or someone who wanted to hurt the family had broken in during the night and murdered them in cold blood. However, that was not the case. The darkest part is that the person who killed the wife and 3 children and then took his own life was Jonathan Candy and not anyone else. The man who was supposed to be the husband and father, the one meant to support, love, and care for them, is the same person who took away their lives. Jonathan Candy, a 42-year-old man from Yukon, Oklahoma, worked part-time as an employee at the Paycom Center, one of Yukon's large arenas used for events like concerts and sports tournaments. During the recent basketball season, he was involved in the preparations for the home game of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Even though he only worked part-time, his jokes and laughter always brought liveliness to the arena. Jonathan Candy attended Bishop McGuinness Catholic High School. After graduating, he married his sweetheart, Lindsay Terry. Lindsay grew up in Prague, Oklahoma. As a young girl, she was a member of the choir and was always cheerful and full of laughter. Jonathan Candy was the funny, goofy guy who loved to make jokes and make everyone laugh. Lindsay Terry was the beautiful young lady who loved to laugh and was eventually charmed and swept off her feet by this goofy guy's jokes and personality. Their marriage seemed to go on smoothly, even after many years and the birth of 4 sons. Jonathan and Lindsay Candy appeared happily married, and there were never any reports of possible domestic violence or abuse. Their children also looked happy and lived like the average American kids. The couple's Facebook page was filled with family photos of happy times, and anyone scrolling by would believe they were a regular, happy family. Jonathan always spoke fondly to his relatives and friends about how his family and children were his entire world. But then, on April 22, 2024, something unexpected and unimaginable occurred. The name of Jonathan's family's youngest son has been withheld for privacy reasons, but what we do know is that this little boy woke up on April 22, 2024, expecting it to be a normal day. He had no idea anything unusual was about to happen. He had slept through the night with a box fan blowing in his direction, so he couldn't have heard anything going on outside. The only thing he remembered hearing was the fire alarm that went off during the night, but he had gone back to sleep right after that. At around 9 a.m., he stepped out of his room only to find his entire family in a pool of blood. At 9:30 a.m. on April 22, 2024, the 10-year-old boy called 911 and told the dispatcher that he found his entire family dead. Not too long after, the police arrived at the home of the Candy family near Southwest 29th Street and Check Hall Road. They entered the house and were shocked by what they saw. It was nothing short of a massacre. After their inspection, they saw 39-year-old Lindsay Candy, who had been shot and killed. She was murdered along with her sons, 18-year-old Dylan Candy, 14-year-old Ethan Candy, and 12-year-old Lucas Candy. The suspected killer, 42-year-old Jonathan Candy, was also found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It didn't take too long to conclude that this was a case of murder-suicide, but the question on everyone's mind was, why did this happen? The sole survivor was the 10-year-old who made the call to 911. Neighbors on Check Hall Road noticed as emergency vehicles began arriving at their neighbor's home. They were puzzled about what might have occurred. After an investigation, it was revealed that the father, Jonathan Candy, allegedly hunted down and killed his wife and children one by one, except for the youngest son. An interview with Oklahoma officials revealed that 2 of the victims' bodies were found upstairs, and the other 2 were found downstairs. There were no signs of a struggle at the crime scene, which adds more uncertainty to what happened. In most cases like this, it is unusual for the killer to spare just one person and kill everyone else if the intention was a murder-suicide. Usually, everyone present is a casualty. What could have happened? Why did Jonathan Candy decide to spare the youngest son? Is it possible he came to his senses at the last minute, or did he have a special relationship with this child? Unfortunately, these questions might remain unanswered, because the relatives of the Candy family realize how difficult this would be for the young boy, and they think it's best to leave him out of any further investigations for the time being. Until then, this case would remain a mystery. One of the officials in charge of the investigation, Dr. Joni Johnston, a clinical and forensic psychologist, was shocked by the entire scenario. She had never encountered a case where a parent killed some of their children and let just one survive. Friends and neighbors who saw Jonathan before the murders said everything seemed normal to them. There were no unusual or out-of-place signs. Jonathan's colleagues specifically mentioned that he attended the Thunder Pelicans playoff game just hours before the tragic murders occurred. Nobody is certain if there were any warning signs that the people around the family should have noticed. There was no evidence of domestic violence, which is often a common factor in murder-suicide cases. Until now, no one can state or accurately speculate the motive behind the murders. All we know is that there was possibly an altercation between Jonathan and Lindsay on the night of the murders. No one knows what their argument could have been about, and why Jonathan decided that the best way to deal with the situation was to kill his wife and methodically hunt down and kill 3 of his children. He seemed like a loving and supportive father, but what could have made him shoot and kill some of the people he claimed to love the most in the world? Something may have happened. He killed his wife and several of his children, and then decided to take his own life. perhaps to escape the situation. Ongoing investigations are trying to find out if the family was experiencing any form of financial crisis. Financial difficulties in households can sometimes lead to depression, particularly for the man who may feel the weight of the burden on his shoulders. This could result in distorted thinking and increase the chances of feeling hopeless and without help. Another factor investigators are considering is whether Jonathan had any form of mental health challenge that he was able to hide effectively and did not share with anyone. There is still a stigma surrounding seeking help for mental health challenges, and those who do not seek help often end up making terrible mistakes that can negatively impact their own lives and the lives of their loved ones. Signs of depression in men often differ from those exhibited by women. Men may have difficulty processing or verbalizing their depressive feelings. Instead, they may isolate themselves, become irritable and edgy, and express anger rather than sadness. The people around them, such as family, friends, and loved ones, may not recognize these behaviors as signs of depression and the potential risk of suicidal tendencies. It's quite unfortunate when people don't seek help for mental health issues on time, because when they enter a certain stage of depression, they lose all hope in the world and believe the best thing they can do is take their own life. The actual motive behind such tragic incidents is not known, so for now, this remains a mystery to everyone. On Lindsay Candy's Facebook page, one of her childhood friends, Kami Cruz, upon hearing the news, shared some details about her friendship with Lindsay. She said that she and Lindsay were both choir members at their church during their younger years, and they sang side by side in the choir. She also mentioned that she and Lindsay attended the same school until they both graduated in 2002. A particular memory Kami Cruz shared helped everyone see the bright and playful nature Lindsay had. She said that as young girls, she and Lindsay hid in a treehouse and fell asleep there. Their parents couldn't find them, became worried, and called the police. At the end of the day, everyone laughed about the situation, stating how the girls gave them a fright of their lives, only to be found asleep in a treehouse. Cruz also mentioned that she and Lindsay had a friendship they could always pick up from where it left off. She stated how devastated she had been after hearing the news of the Candy family's death. She has been unable to imagine or process the entire thing. Cruz said on the Facebook page that Lindsay was so loved and special to many people. She specifically stated how fiercely loved Lindsay was by her boys, and how she brought laughter to every conversation and the lives of her parents, her sister, and their girl group. Dylan Candy was the first son of Jonathan and Lindsay Candy. He was a sociable person who easily made friends, and it was evident that he had a passion for drumming and music in general. In May 2023, he recently graduated from Mustang High School. He enjoyed playing in the marching band and attended Oklahoma Baptist University during the fall semester to join the Bison Brigade, which was OBU's marching band, where he played the first bass drum. The director of athletic bands at OBU, Brian Stackhouse, mentioned that the only reason Dylan wasn't leading any section in the band was because he was a freshman. However, he was placed in the position to play the complex first bass because he demonstrated proficiency in playing within the band. Brian Stackhouse described Dylan as an amazing young man with a big heart, someone who was always happy and friendly to everyone, regardless of his personal circumstances. He was an excellent role model for his peers, demonstrating the importance of dedication to the team, the ability to navigate difficult situations, the value of perseverance, consistent effort, and giving one's absolute best. Stackhouse recalled a core memory of Dylan during band camp, when he was informed that he had a solo in the drum line. Dylan was overjoyed and could not contain his excitement, which inspired his bandmates to support one another as they dealt with the devastating news of his passing. Dylan's bass drum and uniform was set up as a memorial display to honor him and his family. 14-year-old Ethan Candy was the second son of the Candy family. He was a 9th grade student at Mustang North Middle School and everyone in school knew him as an active, athletic young boy who was good at baseball. Ethan's coach, T.J. Armstrong, said he was a very energetic and committed player who had a natural talent for the game and always played with so much enthusiasm and intensity. He said Ethan had an inspiring spirit and a smile that could uplift people's mood. T.J. Armstrong was quite fond of Ethan, as he was best friends with his own son, and he believed Ethan brought out the best in his son. T.J. would often affectionately call Ethan Sweet Candyman. Cooper Armstrong and Wyatt Livy, Ethan's closest friends, as well as his other friends, have struggled to come to terms with the loss of Ethan. A memorial bench is being established at the Mustang Youth Sports Complex to commemorate his presence in their lives and on the team. Lucas Candy was the youngest victim of the murders. He was a 12-year-old student at Meadowbrook Intermediate. He was often seen playing with the other young children during Ethan's soccer practice. Lucas was a lively, intelligent child, full of energy. He will be remembered as a bright, cheerful kid who enjoyed playing outside and making new friends. One of the saddest aspects of this tragic story is that the youngest child and sole survivor of the Candy family will have to grow up knowing that his entire family was murdered by his father. At 10 years old, he is already facing a future where he will have to navigate life without his immediate family. No father, no mother, no siblings. In a single night, his entire life was turned upside down, and those he called family are no more. He may grow up seeking closure for what happened, but sadly, he may never find the answers he seeks. This is a burden too heavy to be placed on a 10-year-old child with his entire future ahead of him. He has been placed in the care of extended family members, and people in the community are coming together to show him as much support as possible to help him deal with this difficult reality. Social workers have been assigned to work closely with the family to make sure he receives every necessary emotional and psychological support. A GoFundMe has been set up for him, and people have been encouraged to give as much as they can to assist with his upkeep, education, and future needs. The support that has been received so far from the community has been very heartwarming and overwhelming, proving to the only surviving Candy son and their other family members that they are not alone in these painful times. No one ever saw this coming. This is one reason why the news is so shocking to those who knew the family. At the local station KF, Jonathan's family released a statement where they expressed how truly confused and devastated they were. They said they have so many questions they won't ever have answers to. One of Candy's family neighbors, 68-year-old Michael Burham, said that it's hard for him to believe that his neighbors are no more and that he already misses them. Another neighbor, Brian Graham, mentioned how handy and helpful Jonathan was around the neighborhood. T.J. Armstrong, Ethan's coach, said he chose to remember Jonathan Candy as the great person he had always known him to be, someone who was always grateful and gave hugs. Rhonda Armstrong, T.J.'s wife, had known the Candy family for over 3 years. She said that whenever she went to their house or they came over, she could never stop smiling and laughing. They had the ability to make her forget about her bad day at work or her life struggles the moment she saw their smiles. Rhonda also mentioned that Lindsay was always at Ethan's baseball games, cheering the loudest. As they played the games, everyone who knew them saw them as a kind, sweet, and happy family, which made the idea of what happened to them even harder to believe. Investigators are trying to do a thorough search to find clues about the events that led up to Jonathan's drastic actions. They are examining his interactions with friends and family to identify any possibility of a poor mental state. However, since there have been no previous indications of poor mental health, it has been particularly challenging to determine a clear motive behind his actions. However, authorities are using this incident as an opportunity to inform people about the importance of seeking help for any mental health issues. They emphasize the need to break down the stigma associated with seeking help. Jonathan Candy's case further demonstrates how those who appear happy and well on the outside could be dealing with deep inner trauma. Everyone is going through something, so we need to learn to be compassionate with the people we meet and take the time to connect and talk to our family and friends to ensure there is no buildup of negative emotions. Authorities have offered to help people who might be struggling to process their emotions or the news of Candy's family's death by providing them access to support groups and counseling services. This situation seems like an absolute nightmare that everyone wishes they could wake up from. The Candy family was loved by many and will forever be cherished in the hearts of their loved ones. As family and friends grieve the deaths of John, Jonathan, Lindsay, Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas Candy, they also recognize that the priority at a time like this is to ensure that the surviving member of the Candy family receives as much support and love as possible. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of a family in Covina. We inhabit a world where the fragility of human existence is constantly on display. One moment, you may be reveling in the joys of life surrounded by loved ones, and the next, they are calling out for help, their bloodied hands reaching towards you, while you are paralyzed, your own life flashing before your eyes. This is not a scene from a movie, but a harrowing and horrific reality. It is true that we each have but one life, yet death can be a brutal, unpredictable, and intrusive force. Imagine a Christmas party with loved ones gathered together, celebrating the holiday season. However, the joyful gathering was suddenly transformed into a horrific tragedy. On December 24, 2008, in the small town of Covina, California, the Covina massacre occurred, leaving 9 people dead and the community in a state of shock. Gunshots echoed, and a devastating arson fire engulfed the home, trapping the victims inside. What was meant to be a festive celebration turned into a nightmarish scenario. Many were injured, and numerous unanswered questions remained. It was a profoundly sorrowful and terrifying moment, leaving the community to grapple with the underlying causes of this unspeakable act of violence. The Covina massacre remains a haunting reminder that even in the most joyful times, darkness can strike without warning. The Ortega family was having a great time together in their Covina home on Christmas Eve. In the dining room, Papa Joe Ortega, his wife of 53 years, and their children were playing a late-night game of Texas Hold'em. They had just finished dinner and were enjoying each other's company. The grandchildren were in the backyard playing video games and hanging out near the pool. They were having so much fun that they didn't want the night to end. Meanwhile, upstairs, the Ortega's 17-year-old grandson, Michael, was sitting at his computer, typing away. It was a peaceful and happy moment, with everyone doing something they enjoyed. But little did they know, this peaceful night was about to turn into a horror movie. Suddenly, there was a knock at the front door. The 8-year-old girl was so excited, she squealed with delight, "Santa Claus! Santa Claus!" A man dressed as Santa Claus walked in, pulled out a gun, and shot the little girl right in the face. 2 of her uncles tried to protect her, but they were also shot and fell to the ground. The rest of the family, including the Ortegas and 3 of their daughters, tried to hide under the dining table, but it was too late. The fire, which was ignited by a flamethrower device, was incredibly intense and caused a massive explosion that sent flames shooting up into the air. The flames reached a height of 40 to 50 feet, which is as tall as a 5-story building. It was a substantial blaze that required a significant amount of manpower to extinguish. In fact, it took a team of 80 firefighters over an hour and a half to finally put out the fire. It must have been a terrifying and perilous situation for the people in the house and the firefighters who were trying to save them. The fire was so intense that it made it extremely difficult to identify the victims. The flames were so strong that they severely damaged the bodies, making it impossible to recognize them. Therefore, the investigators had to use other methods to determine the identities of the victims. They utilized dental records, such as X-rays of teeth, and medical records, including scars or other unique features, to identify the victims. It was a challenging task, but they were able to use these clues to piece together the identities of those present on that tragic night. The Ortega family's worst fears became a reality that night. The assailant, Bruce Jeffrey Parro, was unrelenting. He killed Papa Joe and his wife, 4 of their children, 2 daughters-in-law, and even the 17-year-old grandson who was peacefully sitting at his computer. No one was spared. The entire family, who had been joyfully celebrating Christmas Eve just moments earlier, was mercilessly murdered. There were around 25 to 30 people celebrating Christmas Eve with the Ortega family. However, after the tragic incident, the survivors did not want to discuss it publicly. Nevertheless, some individuals working on the investigation provided information that corroborated the accounts given by the family members. This information helps us understand what transpired within the house. The family members described a very frightening scene. A man with a gun intended to harm and kill people. The family members attempted to flee and save their loved ones, but it was extremely challenging due to the overwhelming fear and confusion. When Bruce got to the party, many of the adults were near the front door because some people were preparing to leave, which made them easy targets when the attack began. Family members stated that Charles, one of the Ortega sons, identified the gunman after the gunman shot Charles's 8-year-old niece and his older brother James. Someone shouted, "It's Bruce!" Charles was shot right after James. It was an extremely frightening and perilous situation, and everyone was trying to flee from the gunman. Irma Chapo Ortega, a close family member, shared a heartbreaking detail about the tragedy. She said that James and Charles Ortega, despite being wounded, tried to get up and stop the gunman. They were badly hurt, but they still tried to stand up and grab him. Unfortunately, they were unable to do so. Irma also said that the older Ortegas, Joseph and Alicia, and their 3 daughters, along with one of their daughters-in-law, Teresa, hid under the dining room table. She had been in touch with some of the family members who survived the attack, and they shared these details with her. Someone yelled out, "Run, run!" and chaos erupted. The Ortegas and 2 of their daughters, Sylvia and Alicia, might have been killed while they were still in the dining room, but their daughter Leticia, whose little girl was badly hurt, managed to survive. Leticia had hidden under the table for a short time, and she called 911 and told the police dispatcher that she heard the shots, and everyone started panicking and running, and they all dove under the dining room table. Chapa shared a heroic story about her cousin Leticia. She said Leticia saw her injured daughter stumbling out of the house and decided to flee. According to a person close to the investigation, even though the gunman shot the little girl in the face, she may have saved her own life by turning her head at the last moment. The bullet hit her jaw, but fortunately, it did not kill her. The person who provided this detail preferred to remain anonymous, as the police were still investigating the incident. The investigators believe that most of the young people were saved because they were in the back of the house near the TV, likely playing video games, when the gunman started shooting. The 8-year-old girl was injured, and a 16-year-old girl was shot in the back, but fortunately they survived. The only young person who did not make it was Michael Ortiz, a 17-year-old who was sitting at the computer upstairs. Chapa said that Michael was probably killed by the explosion or fire that started when the gunman used a homemade device to set the house on fire. A law enforcement source said it appears that Michael was killed as a result of the fire or explosion and was not shot. It's a tragedy that a young life was lost in such a senseless act of violence. Michael's mother, Alicia, was also killed. But why did the murderer commit such a brutal act of violence? Bruce, a 45-year-old man, was very angry about his marriage ending. He and his wife had just gotten divorced, and he was consumed by hurt and anger. Instead of dealing with his emotions in a healthy manner, he decided to take revenge on her and her family. He chose a tragic and devastating way to do it by attacking them at their annual Christmas party in Covina, California. a team of FBI experts studied Bruce's behavior and found that he had some mental health issues, including extreme narcissism and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Although these conditions are not an excuse or justification, they likely contributed to his decision to commit such a horrific act. It's heartbreaking that a family's joyous celebration turned into a tragedy because of one person's anger and sickness. Bruce had a plan to escape after his attack on the Ortega family. He had even bought a plane ticket to Illinois, thinking he could just leave the chaos behind and start fresh. But his plan didn't work out as he expected. When he set the house on fire, he badly burned himself, suffering second- and third-degree burns on his arms, which are very painful and serious injuries. Instead of escaping, he was left with severe burns. It's amazing how his plan backfired and led to his own suffering. After his failed attempt at escape, Bruce drove 40 miles to his brother's house in Sila. He went there to end his own life. Lieutenant Fred Corral from the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office shared that Bruce had a wound on the top of his head, which suggests that he put the gun in his mouth before pulling the trigger. A toxicology test had to be taken on Bruce, and it was said to have taken up to 6 weeks to get the result. This test would show if Bruce had any drugs or alcohol in his system at the time of his death. When the police searched Bruce's body, they found something strange. He had wrapped $177,000 in cash around his legs with plastic wrap and was wearing a special underwear called a girdle to keep it in place. They also found his rental car parked a walk away from his brother's house. But when they tried to move the car, they realized it was rigged with a dangerous device that would explode if they touched it. The police had to be very careful inside his brother's house. They found 4 empty handguns and a lot of bullets, over 200 rounds. They also found some leftover pieces from his Santa suit that were rigged to explode. Back at Bruce's own house in Montrose, California, the police found even more dangerous things. Empty boxes that had held semi-automatic handguns, a special kind of shotgun called a Benelli M2 Tactical, and a container for a type of gasoline that was highly flammable. But what was most shocking was what they called a virtual bomb factory in his home. It was like a secret workshop where he had been making dangerous devices. It's lucky the police were able to find all of this before anyone else got hurt. On the outside, Bruce Parro seemed like a really charming and generous person. When the witness first heard about it, they knew he was wearing a Santa suit and had seen him more than once, but they didn't think anything of it until they were told that he had used the Santa suit to hide guns and other weapons. That's when it kind of freaked them out, thinking that maybe he had already planned this for a long time. Even the people who knew him best had no idea what was going on behind closed doors. They didn't know that long before his divorce was finalized, Bruce had started secretly collecting weapons and planning an elaborate escape plan. He was living a double life, and no one suspected a thing. In 2004, Bruce Parro met Sylvia Ortiz. They were introduced by her brother-in-law, who worked with Bruce at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Sylvia was 40 years old and had 3 kids from 2 previous marriages. Bruce's friends thought she was perfect for him, a kind and practical woman with a big family who could help him settle down and be happy. At first, Bruce was drawn to his wife's warm and welcoming family, but after the first year of their marriage, she told friends he had become cold, miserable, and distant. They often argued about money. In March 2008, Bruce and Sylvia decided to separate. Sylvia asked Bruce if she could stay in their home until her daughter finished kindergarten, but Bruce wasn't having it. While Sylvia was out at a family gathering, Bruce packed up all her stuff and left it on the driveway. Sylvia was devastated and had to move in with her sister in Glensdale, eventually filing for divorce. Bruce went to Gun World in Burbank on June 13th and bought a handgun for almost $1,000 cash. He got fired on July 31st for fraud and tried to get unemployment benefits, but couldn't get them. He went back to Gun World on August 8th and bought another handgun, keeping coming back to the store and buying a total of 5 handguns. He also ordered a Santa suit from a costume store, saying it was for a kid's party, and paid a $200 deposit. Bruce also went to a gun shop in Iowa and bought 16 magazines that can hold 18 bullets each, way more than California laws allow. Just a week before Christmas, his marriage to Sylvia was officially over. They had been having too many problems and couldn't fix them, so the judge ended their marriage in a courthouse in Bank just before Christmas. Bruce Parto rented 2 cars, a Dodge and a Toyota. He packed the Toyota with all sorts of stuff like maps, water, food, clothes, and a can of gasoline. He also put in 2 computers. Later that night, his neighbor Bong Garcia saw him leaving in the Dodge, which was weird because he usually drove his fancy Escalade Hummer. Bruce said he was off to a Christmas party, but Bong thought it was strange. As the house burned, a neighbor saw a blue car drive away with its headlights off. A pair of fake glasses and Santa's hat had been dropped in the front yard. Bruce drove to his brother's house in Sylmar, 40 miles away. He was badly burned with severe injuries on his arms, hands, neck, and legs. His Santa suit had melted into his skin, and he was in a terrible state. When his brother got home at 3:10 a.m., he found Bruce's body on the couch with 2 guns next to him. He had shot himself in the mouth while still wearing his wedding ring. Letitia Youssef Sky is a strong woman who chooses not to let anger and hate consume her. She says she can't do anything to change what happened, and she can only focus on what's brought to her and the good things that are brought to her. She is grateful for the love and support she's received from people she didn't even know, and this gratitude has helped her heal. Leticia has also stopped dwelling on the past and the person who hurt her family. She says she won't allow him to consume them with his evilness, and instead chooses love and encourages others to do the same. Leticia believes love is the strongest energy and that it can bring people together and help them heal. She also thinks it's important to teach our children about love and kindness so they can grow up to be good examples for others. She says our kids are our future, and we have to be an example for them. If we teach them that it's okay to hate, it's okay to be violent, and make them feel less than, then what hope do we have? During a school walkout, Katrina Y.F. Sky could read the names of the 17 victims killed in Parkland, Florida, 1 month ago. Gun violence is personal for the Laurel High School student. Nearly 10 years ago, she survived a Christmas Eve massacre when she was only 8. Being able to really fight for something that is truly close to my heart is very different. 12 years have passed, and Leticia and Katrina Youssef Sky are working hard to keep their family's tradition and happy memories alive. The family still gets together for dinner, exchanges gifts, and shares stories about their loved ones who are no longer with them. On Christmas Eve, they visit the cemetery where their family members are buried instead of going to church. One of the nephews who lost both his parents in the tragedy has become the guardian of his 3 younger siblings. Leticia and her husband took in her sister's youngest daughter, and Leticia worked hard to make sure the surviving kids still had a sense of Christmas. She told them that the Santa who came that night wasn't the real one. The kids even went to a special camp to help them deal with their grief and trauma. Leticia says, no matter where you look, there are memories of what they used to have, and then memories of that terrible night. You can't escape it, but even with all the pain, Leticia knows that Christmas will always be special, and they will keep celebrating no matter what. Even though the investigation ended almost 10 years ago, the detectives who helped the family still keep in touch, especially around Christmas. They care about the family and want to make sure they're doing okay. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The incredible case of Michelle Whitaker. Michelle Laurel Whitaker was born on August 16, 1969, as the 4th of 5 children to her parents. According to her mom, Laura Andrews, Michelle was extremely close to her entire family. However, this changed when they moved from Illinois to Gastonia, North Carolina. And Michelle's once happy demeanor began to fade. As she entered her teenage years, Michelle and her mom began to clash frequently, primarily due to her mom's strictness. After graduating from high school, Michelle got married, but the union lasted less than a year. Her inexperience and youth made it difficult for her to handle the problems her partner created. The abusive treatment by her husband marked the beginning of a prolonged and distressing period in Michelle's life. Those close to her believe this tumultuous period led to her later struggles. At the time, she struggled to cope and made poor choices as a result. After her divorce, Michelle's family moved to Spartanburg, South Carolina. By the time she was 30, Michelle was struggling with alcohol addiction and had already had 3 failed marriages. She was working part-time as a waitress and was barely getting by. One evening in 1999, Michelle met a man named David after her shift ended, and he offered to give her a ride home. Michelle accepted, but soon regretted her decision. Instead of taking her home, David took her to a secluded area where he assaulted her and forced her into intimate contact. He was arrested a year later, pleaded guilty to assault and battery, and received an 8-year prison sentence. Just before she disappeared, Michelle was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. Michelle's parents decided it was time to take drastic measures. They contacted the police and asked them to hold Michelle in custody until a spot in a rehabilitation center became available. Although it was a difficult decision, her parents felt it was the only way to help Michelle in her situation. However, Michelle became extremely upset by this, and from that point on, her relationship with her mother significantly deteriorated. Unfortunately, Michelle was mistakenly released from jail without receiving the court-ordered treatment for her substance and alcohol abuse. On August 5, 2002, Michelle had an argument with her mother and stormed out of the house in a bad mood. 3 days later, the man she was staying with contacted her mother, Laura Andrews, to inform her that he couldn't find Michelle after they had had an argument. This is how Laura learned of her daughter's disappearance. Laura immediately sought help from a friend who worked at the local police station. But the police, familiar with Michelle's lifestyle, advised her to wait a little longer, assuring her that Michelle would likely show up on her own. However, 2 weeks passed and Michelle failed to return home. On August 21, 2002, Laura filed an official missing persons report, and local law enforcement began investigating Michelle Whitaker's disappearance. During their investigation, they discovered the last place Michelle was spotted, a truck stop. This information came from a local resident named Doug, who had met Michelle by chance on the street the day before she disappeared. Doug recounted that he had stopped his motorcycle outside a bar where Michelle was sitting and struck up a conversation with her. Michelle told him that she had had a fight with her boyfriend and he had thrown her out of the house. Later that evening, they visited 2 bars together, playing a few games of billiards at one of them. They then took a ride on Doug's motorcycle until dawn, after which they went to his house. Thus, it was revealed that Michelle Whitaker had spent her last evening visiting local bars, and Doug was the last person to have seen her alive. This made Doug the prime suspect in Michelle's disappearance. According to his testimony, Michelle had planned to go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, a resort city on the Atlantic coast, where she hoped to earn good money working in local bars and restaurants. Doug claimed that he dropped Michelle off at a truck stop, but only after giving her some clothes, including a t-shirt and shorts, and some money to buy coffee and newspapers. He said he wished her good luck before leaving. To verify Doug's story, the police gave him a lie detector test, which he passed. They also tested the man Michelle had been staying with before she vanished, but found no evidence to suggest he was involved in her disappearance. The police began to consider the possibility that Michelle had actually gone to Myrtle Beach, which is approximately 250 miles from Spartanburg. A few more weeks went by, But there was still no sign of Michelle. Her family and friends were growing increasingly anxious. Despite her anger and resentment towards her parents, they couldn't bring themselves to believe she would abandon her family and go into hiding. Michelle's prolonged disappearance made the local sheriff question her motives. When people travel for extended periods, they typically take some personal belongings with them, but Michelle had left with almost nothing. Moreover, she had a beloved pet dog to which she was deeply attached. Every detective interviewed agreed that Michelle would never willingly abandon her dog. In the meantime, Michelle's parents began driving around the neighborhood, hoping to find any clue that might lead them to their daughter. After receiving multiple tips that Michelle had been spotted on a beach in North Carolina, they headed there immediately. They spent 3 days searching for her, posting flyers and talking to locals, but their efforts ultimately proved fruitless. After 6 months of unsuccessful searches, Laura Andrews started questioning whether her behavior towards her daughter had been right. She had witnessed her daughter's downward spiral and couldn't just stand by. Laura wanted to protect her in any way possible. Additionally, she suspected that the 1999 brutal attack Michelle suffered might have contributed to her disappearance. Laura couldn't forgive herself for the hurtful words she spoke to Michelle after the attack, despite the assault being a terrible act by a stranger. Laura initially blamed Michelle for taking a destructive path and causing harm to herself, which only damaged Michelle's self-esteem further with her words. From the sheriff's office, it was assumed Michelle had motives to escape due to her reputation. Detectives thought she'd eventually be arrested, but a year passed with no results. The police were alarmed that Michelle left no digital traces, which wasn't a good sign. Both police and family wondered if Michelle was a crime victim, possibly falling prey to a truck driver, but this theory remained unsubstantiated. 2 more years passed with no leads. On the 3rd anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, after police and Laura Andrews visited the truck stop where Michelle was last seen, local TV stations revisited the story. Just days after Michelle's story aired on TV news, the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office received a strange letter. The anonymous letter, handwritten on a small sheet of paper, claimed to reveal the location of Michelle Whitaker's body. A crude, homemade map accompanied the letter, pinpointing the exact spot. Despite its amateurish appearance, the letter was well written and proper, lending it an air of credibility. The sheriff, accompanied by search dogs, embarked on a search of a rural area 25 miles from where Michelle was last seen. This development came 3 years after her disappearance, and her family was torn between despair and hope. Some had reluctantly accepted that Michelle might be dead, while others clung to the possibility that she was alive and safe. The search dogs were unable to detect any scent, and the operation was eventually called off. Although relieved that no body was found, the investigators remained perplexed by the letter. A handwriting analysis and DNA evidence from the envelope suggested that the author was a woman, but her identity remained unknown. In 2006, Michelle's parents relocated to Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is 65 miles from Spartanburg. A year later, on the 5th anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, the whole family gathered at the church. Michelle's mother, Laura Andrews, did not want to treat the gathering as a memorial service because Michelle's body had not been found, and there was still a faint hope that she might be alive. Another year passed, and Detective William Gary took over the investigation of Michelle's disappearance. At the time, he was handling a dozen unsolved cases, including Michelle's. Since many years had gone by without any evidence that Michelle was still alive, her case was considered a felony. The lack of evidence led the investigators to believe that something tragic had likely occurred. As the 6th anniversary of Michelle's disappearance approached on August 4, 2008, Detective Gary received a call from a woman claiming to know Michelle's whereabouts. She said Michelle was living in Oregon. The woman had seen Michelle's file on an episode of Forensic Files and a website created by Laura, which helped her recognize Michelle as a woman who had been living with friends for 6 years, unaware that her family had been searching for her. After receiving the mysterious message, the investigators were understandably cautious. Detective William Gary, for evidence, requested that the woman send a photo of Michelle. He then showed the picture to Detective Wood, who had previously worked on the case and immediately recognized her. Promptly, an Oregon State police officer was dispatched to the address in question to confirm Michelle's identity. In a remarkable coincidence, on August 5, 2008, exactly 6 years after Michelle's argument with her mother and her departure from home, Detective Laura Andrews received a call informing her that her daughter had been found alive. Laura struggled to process the news, and only after hanging up the phone did a flood of questions arise. Where is she? How is she? And what had she been doing all this time? Although the news was welcome, a family reunion was not possible at this point. The police were bound to respect Michelle's privacy and could not disclose her whereabouts to her parents. It was up to Michelle to initiate contact with her family. The detectives tried to persuade Michelle to talk to her relatives, if only to alleviate their concerns. The next evening, Michelle phoned her mother. 2 weeks later, at Atlanta Airport, Michelle and her family had a long overdue reunion. She confessed that she was exhausted from her former way of life. After her argument with her mom, Michelle came to a realization. She believed her family would be better off without her around. Initially, when Doug dropped her off at the truck stop, Michelle had planned to head to Myrtle Beach to find work. But instead, she hitchhiked and ended up in Las Vegas, then California, and eventually Oregon. Michelle offered apologies to both her family and the police, who had invested considerable time and resources into searching for her over the past 6 years. She had been living under her real name, and it never occurred to her that anyone was still looking for her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shanae Brooke Edwards. Shanae Brooke Edwards was born in 1989 in Warrnambool, Australia. Shanae grew up with her parents and older brother Tyson. Although her early life and upbringing are not well documented, her loved ones remembered her as an adventure seeker who loved nature, hiking, motorcycling, and animals. She was a kind-hearted, genuine person who formed deep, sincere connections with others, showing generosity, patience, love, and kindness to everyone she met. In 2019, Shanae traveled to Georgia, a country that had long fascinated her with its natural beauty, rich history, and landmarks. Her boyfriend, Maori El Sayed, a Lebanese national, had planned to join her in Georgia, but was unable to do so because the country's borders were closed to unvaccinated individuals at the time. Shanae resided in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, where she worked as an English teacher. This allowed her to support herself financially while exploring the country and visiting new destinations. She formed close bonds with like-minded friends who shared her passion for travel. On July 29, 2021, Shanae uploaded a photo to her social media profile, captioning it with the single word, joy. The image was taken during a scenic motorcycle ride, an activity she thoroughly enjoyed. The following day, July 30, 2021, Shanae decided to hike up Matatsminda, a popular tourist attraction situated in the heart of Tbilisi. According to her friends, Shanae would often take leisurely strolls in the wooded area near the mountain, and she had never encountered any issues or threats to her personal safety. On July 30, 2021, Shanae left her residence around 3:30 p.m. and was last spotted near the Church of St. Michael of Tavare, located at the foot of Mount Matatsminda, which serves as a starting point for hikers. Shanae was scheduled to meet friends at a cafe in the capital city, but she failed to appear. When attempts to reach her by phone proved unsuccessful, her friends decided to file a missing persons report with the local authorities. Meanwhile, a friend of Shanae's living in California grew concerned and placed a call to Shanae's phone. When the call was answered, Shanae could be heard screaming, "Please let me go. okay? Just let me go," indicating that she was being attacked and desperately seeking release. The call was abruptly disconnected, and when Shanae's friend tried to call back, there was no answer. There are conflicting accounts of what Shanae's friend in California did next. According to some reports, she posted an urgent message to a Facebook group comprised of expats living in Georgia, asking someone to alert the police to the disturbing phone call. Other sources claim that Shanae's friend directly contacted the Georgian police and relayed the distressing details. It is certain that within hours of Shanae making a frightening phone call, Georgian police became aware of it and began to investigate. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers were deployed to search the area, focusing on the slopes of Mount Matatsminda. The search party utilized search dogs and drones, but Shanae remained missing. By sunset, her phone was still off, and she had not visited any local hospitals. This lack of progress was ominous, as was confirmed the following day. Tragically, on July 31st, after an extensive search, 31-year-old Shanae Brooke Edwards was discovered deceased near a hiking trail. The perpetrator attempted to conceal evidence by hiding the body under tree branches and leaves. A knife, believed to be the crime weapon, was found nearby. Shanae's phone was soon discovered on the mountainside. Further inspection of the crime scene revealed an old, rusty shovel, a fireplace, used needles, and numerous empty bottles. Georgia's Interior Minister revealed to local media that the police have uncovered information not yet disclosed to the public to protect the integrity of the investigation. He assured that the ministry and police officers are doing everything possible to find the perpetrator. The forensic examination of Shanae's body revealed 13 stab wounds, with 5 in the neck area, leading the police to conclude that the perpetrator undoubtedly intended to kill the young woman. Signs of strangulation were also found on her neck. After the authorities officially confirmed Shanae's death, the media reported that the crime was motivated by lust, but the Georgian police denied this, citing the forensic medical examiner's failure to find any signs of a crime against the woman's integrity. Shanae's boyfriend, Moody El-Sayed, has vowed to track down the culprit, no matter how long it takes, and exact revenge. Shanae's death was a devastating blow to her friends, and a particularly traumatic experience for her family, who lived on another continent. They faced the difficult task of transporting her body back home, while the police worked to identify the perpetrator. Although the police are directly responsible for preventing crimes and capturing criminals, in this case, there was an added concern. Georgia's billion-dollar tourism industry could be severely impacted by the fact that a tourist had lost her life in the capital city, a popular tourist destination. The police conducted an extensive investigation, interviewing over 200 people, including Shanae's friends, co-workers, neighbors, and employees and visitors of Matatsminda Park. They examined the roots of the case and reviewed video footage of Shanae's movements on the day she went missing. In an expat Facebook group, a local woman reported hearing a woman screaming on the trails below Matatsminda Park around an hour after Shanae left home. Another woman in the same group claimed to have witnessed a disturbing scene on the mountain the day before Shanae went missing, in which a man was seen aggressively assaulting a woman in the same area where the crime eventually took place. At the same time, the laboratory analyzed the crime weapon and discovered a male DNA sample, but no matches were found in the Georgian police database. Consequently, the samples were sent to the databases of 194 Interpol member states for further checking. Witness interviews revealed that Shanae had no enemies, no history of conflict with anyone, and no association with individuals of questionable character, suggesting she may have been a random victim of a crime with an unclear motive. The police conducted a meticulous investigation, collecting genetic samples from several dozen individuals who could potentially have been involved in the crime, and subjected each to rigorous scrutiny. Following a thorough and multifaceted investigation, authorities were able to narrow down the list of suspects until they found a DNA match. 40 days after Shanae Brooke Edwards' death, the Georgia police released a statement announcing the arrest of a 33-year-old man, Rafael Marsokolov, a Georgian citizen born in 1988. The evidence gathered during the investigation, including testimony, surveillance footage, genetic tests, and other proof, led to his arrest on September 8. Marsokolov's lawyer stated that his client denies all charges, including robbery and the murder of Shanae Brooke Edwards, and has pleaded not guilty. The lawyer claimed that Marsokolov was not involved in the case and has chosen to exercise his right to remain silent. After Marsokolov's identity was made public, his image was broadcast on television. A woman from the Georgian capital took to Facebook to share a post revealing that her friend had been attacked by two men on Mount Matatsmunda a few months prior. And although the police were aware of the perpetrators' identities, the case was closed. She suggested that if the police had done their job properly, the Australian girl might still be alive. Additionally, Marsokolov's own Facebook page revealed that he was an activist for the ruling Georgian Dream Party. On September 10, 2021, the Tbilisi court denied Marsokolov's request to be released on bail while awaiting trial, instead keeping him in custody. The police had obtained strong physical evidence, as well as damning testimony from Marsokolov's brother and wife, who revealed that Marsokolov had confessed to the crime at home. He warned them that if they told anyone about his involvement in Shanae Brooke Edwards' attack, their young child would face the same fate. In October 2021, the Edwards family wrote a heartfelt letter describing Shanae's personality and expressing gratitude to everyone who had supported them. They specifically thanked the government of Georgia for its financial assistance in repatriating Shanae's body and the Georgian people for their ongoing love, attention, and support during this difficult and tragic period. In February 2022, the first hearing on the case took place under Georgian law. Marsokolov faced a possible sentence of 16 to 20 years in prison. At the trial, he chose not to remain silent and pleaded guilty to robbery. However, he denied intentionally taking Shanae's life. The prosecutor disagreed, pointing out that the 13 stab wounds, including 5 to the neck, indicated Marsokolov's intent to kill the victim. After his knife broke, he even strangled Shanae. The defense claimed that Marsokolov has mental health issues and was in an abnormal state when the crime occurred. However, a psychological examination found him to be sane, allowing the court to impose a meaningful punishment based on the severity of the crime. The prosecutor noted that Marsokolov's blood tested positive for powerful drugs at the time of his arrest, but this did not diminish his guilt. Marsokolov admitted his guilt and apologized to Shanae Brooke Edwards' family in his final statement. According to the alleged motive, Marsokolov had intended to steal Shanae's iPhone 12, but his plan was foiled when she threw the phone into a ravine. Only 2 people knew what happened that day, and sadly, one of them is no longer alive to tell the tale. The prosecution requested a postponement of the sentencing, as the victim's brother, Tyson Edwards, wanted to attend the hearing. In a statement, Shanae Brooke Edwards' family urged the Georgian justice system to impose a life imprisonment sentence on Rafael Marsokolov, citing the tragic and devastating loss of their loved one, who left behind many grieving friends and family members. On March 9, 2022, a trial was held, at which Rafael Marsokolov was found guilty. Representing the family, Shanae's brother Tyson again requested that the defendant be given a life sentence. Marsokolov apologized to Tyson Edwards, claiming he was not that kind of person and had simply found himself in this situation. Ultimately, 33-year-old Rafael Marsokolov was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, the maximum penalty allowed under Georgian law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Camilleri. Jessica Camilleri, the second daughter of Rita and Vince, an Australian Maltese couple, was born with a mild mental disability. Her IQ was between 55 and 60, placing her in the bottom 1% of the population. People with mild intellectual disability like Jessica learn to communicate and express themselves, but at a slower pace than others. They may take longer to develop skills like speaking, reading, writing, and math, but they can still adapt to daily life. Due to her condition, Jessica was slow in reaching developmental milestones like walking, talking, and coordinating movements. She started school much later than her peers, which made her a target for teasing, discomfort, and bullying from her classmates for being different. As a result, Jessica developed stress, anxiety, and anger, particularly towards females. She also struggled with intermittent explosive disorder, characterized by sudden, repeated outbursts of impulsive, aggressive, and violent behavior, as well as angry verbal eruptions that were disproportionate to the situation. At school, Jessica exhibited aggressive behavior towards both students and teachers, including a notable incident where she punched a male student and refused to release her grip, leading to her indefinite suspension and subsequent confinement at home under the care of her mother, Rita, who received a disability pension to support her. Jessica's behavioral issues were symptomatic of her intellectual disability and struggled with irrational outbursts of anger. Furthermore, she was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, a chronic brain condition that affects millions of children worldwide, making it challenging for her to regulate her behavior. In addition to these conditions, Jessica also suffered from severe bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and autism spectrum disorders, which impacted her judgment, self-awareness, and empathy towards others. She had obsessive tendencies, such as fixating on her 3 favorite numbers, 2, 3, and 5, each of which she associated with a specific color, yellow, green, and purple, respectively. Jessica would often repeat these numbers to generate random phone numbers, which she would then use to call and talk to men. In one instance, starting in 2018, she began harassing the staff of a meat company in Daylesford, England, even going so far as to threaten the owner's family, claiming she would decapitate them with a chainsaw. Jessica had a persistent fascination with horror movies, particularly the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She would spend hours rewatching disturbing videos, and this obsession often led to furious outbursts when her mother, Rita, tried to restrict her access to these films. Jessica and her mother lived together in a house in St. Clair, a suburb of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Jessica's father, Vince, had divorced Rita during her teenage years due to the strain their daughter's behavioral problems had put on their marriage. Jessica struggled with low self-esteem and a childish, naive outlook, but she also displayed strong narcissistic tendencies. Deep down, she felt she was one of a kind and entitled to special treatment due to her mental disability. This occasionally led her to be exploitative and egocentric. Despite this, Rita remained devoted to caring for her daughter, acknowledging her issues, but feeling a strong sense of responsibility to look after and protect her. Rita even went so far as to reach out and apologize to one of the recipients of Jessica's harassing phone calls, confessing that she was at a loss for how to manage her daughter's behavior. Jessica was very close to her mother, who dedicated her life to taking care of her and meeting all her needs. Instead of sending her to a psychiatric institution for full-time care, her mother chose to keep her at home. In fact, Rita's life revolved around Jessica. The tragic event of July 20th, 2019, was not a standalone incident. In the 6 years leading up to it, Jessica had been convicted twice for assaults that caused actual bodily harm. She had also physically attacked her aunt and her sister's mother-in-law by pulling their hair. But she avoided jail time and was always placed in the care of her mother, Rita, the one person who could tolerate her behavior. Jessica had also exhibited aggressive behavior towards women she encountered in the streets and shopping centers, lashing out at those she perceived as looking at her wrongly or making her feel ashamed. On one occasion, she was even barred from a doctor's office after becoming violent towards another patient in the waiting room due to paranoia. In early 2018, Jessica's aggressive behavior continued when she attacked a nurse during a hospital visit with her mother Rita. As a result, she was admitted to a mental health unit for 9 days to treat a severe episode of mood disorder. She was prescribed lithium for her supposed bipolar disorder, along with antipsychotic medications. However, by the end of 2018, about 6 months before the tragic event, Jessica had stopped taking her medication and instead began using natural remedies to manage her conditions. Rita was at her wit's end and paid $2,500 to a medium on Queen Street in St. Mary's, a western suburb of Sydney, in a desperate bid to exorcise the demon she believed was possessing her daughter Jessica. Despite her family and friends warning her about the dangers of living with Jessica, Rita remained adamant that her daughter wouldn't hurt anyone. According to Christy, Jessica's older sister, their mother Rita had a heart of gold, always putting others before herself, including Jessica, who continually refused to seek professional help. Rita's sister often voiced her concerns that Jessica might harm her, recognizing Rita's unconditional love for her daughter. However, Rita's motherly love made her oblivious to these warnings, even on the day before the tragic attack, when she had to take Jessica to a police station due to her threatening calls to strangers. Jessica felt humiliated by her mom in a parking lot after visiting her sister due to a stranger's brief presence. Later, when her mom refused to order food from Red Rooster, Jessica called the restaurant 3 times. She then demanded her mom call a doctor, but Jessica's erratic behavior scared him off. At wit's end, Rita called an ambulance to take Jessica to a mental health facility. On the night of July 20th, 2019, Jessica's most severe episode of rage was about to unfold. In a brutal attack, Jessica dragged her 57-year-old mother Rita by the hair to the kitchen of their own home. There, she savagely attacked Rita with 7 meat cleavers, 4 of which broke under the force of her blows. In total, Jessica stabbed Rita over 100 times in the head and neck, driven by a morbid curiosity fueled by her daily obsession with horror films. The autopsy revealed the full extent of Rita's injuries, which included massive trauma to her head and neck, and death by multiple stab wounds that resulted in decapitation at the 2nd vertebrae in her upper neck. Furthermore, Rita's body showed over 90 defensive wounds, indicating that she was conscious for a significant part of the attack. Enduring extreme physical pain and emotional terror at the hands of her own daughter, whom she had lovingly cared for. Jessica's 4-year-old nephew, the son of her older sister Christy, was present during the attack. The boy had been in Rita's care for a few days due to Jessica's apparent improvement. However, he was forced to witness Jessica repeatedly stabbing his grandmother and ultimately decapitating her. When the boy tried to intervene, Jessica attacked him, causing a minor head injury. The traumatic scene was so disturbing that the young boy began vomiting in response. Jessica called the emergency number from her mother Rita's cell phone, confessing to her murder and claiming self-defense, stating that Rita had attacked her first. However, this was not true, and Jessica had actually committed the brutal act. In reality, after killing her mother, Jessica panicked and repeatedly stabbed Rita's lifeless body, ultimately decapitating her and inflicting over 100 wounds. She then dumped Rita's head in a nearby neighbor's front yard. When the police arrived at their St. Clair, Sydney home, Jessica was outside, her clothes stained with her mother's blood, holding a water bottle. She showed no remorse for her actions and was more concerned about her own fate. Jessica asked the police officers and detectives if it was possible to bring someone back to life after decapitation, believing in the possibility of medical miracles that could reattach her mother's head. The police officer responded that this idea was unrealistic, but Jessica insisted, thinking that doctors could perform miraculous surgeries and reattach her mother's head. She also inquired about the potential consequences of her actions, specifically asking if she would face the death penalty. Upon learning that Australia does not have capital punishment, Jessica felt relieved. Furthermore, Jessica confessed to the police that the idea of decapitating her mother came from the horror movies she obsessively watched. A police officer's body camera recorded a chilling conversation at the crime scene on July 20, 2019. At 11:43 p.m., the first responders described the scene as one of the most horrific they had ever seen. The next day, July 21, 2019, Jessica appeared in court but didn't apply for bail. A friend explained that this was not surprising, as Jessica probably didn't understand the bail process. After a trial that highlighted her long history of mental illness, Jessica was found guilty of manslaughter in December 2020. She had pleaded not guilty to murder due to her disability. In early 2021, Jessica was sentenced to a maximum of 21 years and 7 months in prison. She will be eligible for parole after serving 16 years and 2 months, which would be September 19, 2035. The prosecutor argued that Rita's brutal murder was the culmination of a lifetime of escalating violence by Jessica, which started with hair-pulling and eventually led to a deadly explosive attack. The prosecutor also stated that Jessica posed a moderate to high risk of reoffending and remained a danger to the community. Christy, Jessica's older sister, said that Jessica had killed and butchered their mother, and for that, she could never forgive her. However, Rita's sister held a different view, hoping that Jessica would get the help she needed and that Rita could finally rest in peace, knowing that Jessica was being cared for by a system that had failed her when she was alive. The judge presiding over the case offered counseling services to the jury members, recognizing that the disturbing evidence they had heard could haunt them long after the trial. The judge also admitted that selecting a jury for Jessica's trial was difficult, as many people were reluctant to participate in a trial involving such a disturbing crime. The judge described Rita's murder as one of the most brutal and cruel cases of homicide a court could encounter, emphasizing that the crime's severity was exacerbated by its occurrence in the victim's own home. Jessica's lawyer revealed that his client had expressed regret in a letter to her family after the crime. In the letter, Jessica accepted responsibility for her mother's death, acknowledging that Rita had not provoked her and taking blame for her actions. However, one of the psychiatrists who evaluated Jessica noted that she struggled to communicate through social gestures and displayed a relatively flat affect. The psychiatrist found no evidence of schizophrenia or hallucinations in Jessica. The conclusion was that Jessica's risk factors could only be managed in the long term with a comprehensive mental health support plan. Since entering prison, Jessica has persistently caused trouble. Only 2 months after her arrival, on September 9, 2019, she got into a fight with another inmate over food trading and threw a teacup at them. Although she was charged with assault in local court the next day, she did not receive any additional punishment. On October 14, 2019, Jessica attacked another inmate, which resulted in her being placed in solitary confinement in her cell for 5 days. On November 3, 2019, she disobeyed an order, and on July 31, 2020, she damaged property, incurring a fine of $200 Australian dollars. Jessica was involved in another assault on November 21, 2020, which led to her being placed in solitary confinement for 7 days. In January 2021, she was convicted of common assault again, but did not receive any further punishment. Jessica has explained her behavior, saying that other prisoners make her life difficult, regardless of what she does or where she goes. She has also stated that prison life is tough and very different from the outside world. On May 15, 2023, Justice Peter Hamill of the Sydney Supreme Court rejected claims that Kaleri's original sentence was too harsh and that the judge who sentenced her had misjudged the severity of her crime. However, Justice Hamill did rule that Kaleri should be resentenced, a decision supported by Justices Christine Adamson and Richard Kavanaugh. The basis for this decision was Kaleri's bizarre behavior, including walking into the street with her mother's head and asking emergency responders if they could reattach it, which demonstrated how out of touch with reality her actions were. After considering the opinions of multiple psychiatrists and a psychologist, Justice Hamill found that Caleri's intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder meant she only had a basic understanding of what was morally wrong. As a result, he ordered that she be sentenced to 16 years in prison, with a minimum of 12 years before being eligible for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a sunny afternoon in Bon Beach, Florida, a man named Muhammad visited the local police department with a shocking story. He claimed that a woman, whom he knew only as Delilah, had approached him with an unusual and disturbing request. Muhammad alleged that Delilah had offered to hire him to commit a murder. While his story seemed plausible, Muhammad failed to provide one crucial detail: Delilah's last name. Despite this limitation, the Bon Beach Police Department took Muhammad's claim seriously and launched an investigation. The detectives were tasked with identifying the mysterious Delilah and determining who her husband was. To gather more information, they decided to use Muhammad as bait to set up a meeting with Delilah. They chose a local mobile gas station as the meeting location, given Muhammad's statement that Delilah lived nearby. At the designated meeting spot, the police set up several surveillance vehicles to monitor the encounter, hoping to gather evidence and piece together the puzzle surrounding Delilah's identity and motives. Before the woman arrived, the detectives briefed Muhammad on what to say to her. They secretly fitted him with a wire and recorder, allowing them to listen in on their conversation as it happened. As they continued to monitor the mobile gas station, the detectives focused on the interaction between Muhammad and a woman named Delilah. What surprised them was Delilah's appearance, which didn't fit the typical profile of someone who would want her husband killed. Delilah, an attractive woman wearing a skirt and tank top, got into the car with Muhammad. Muhammad, pretending to be hesitant, asked if it was worth having someone killed. Delilah replied that she couldn't divorce her husband because she feared he would retaliate if she tried to leave him and divide their assets. The woman told Muhammad that after her husband's murder, she intended to create an alibi by going to a different location, such as Boca Raton. Muhammad then asked her if anyone would suspect her of involvement in her husband's death, and she confidently replied that no one would accuse her. The detectives were stunned by the woman's casual tone as she discussed hiring a hitman to kill her husband. As they continued to listen, they were horrified by the woman's nonchalant attitude, which made it seem like she was discussing a routine business deal rather than arranging for someone's murder. At one point, she even showed Muhammad photos of her husband, which further revealed her callous disregard for human life. During the conversation, the woman made a stunning admission to Muhammad, revealing that she planned to pay a hitman to kill her husband. This confession was a crucial breakthrough for the detective, as it confirmed the woman's involvement in soliciting a murder. However, the detective knew that to build a stronger case, they needed to gather more evidence. The woman told Muhammad that she would withdraw $1,000 in cash and hand it over to the hitman later. After discussing the plan with Muhammad, the woman left the mobile gas station and drove home. The detectives followed her to gather information about her address. A records check revealed that the address belonged to Dalia Doe, not Delilah as they had initially thought. With this new information, the detectives ran a background check on the vehicle Dalia used to meet Muhammad at the gas station. This allowed them to obtain the registered owner's name, which was her husband, Mike Doe. To their friends, Mike and Dalia seemed like a loving and happy couple. The two had met when Mike was browsing the internet at work, looking for something to do when he was feeling bored. Mike found a website that offered escort services and decided to hire one. This decision would have a profound impact on his life. When the escort arrived, Mike was immediately drawn to her physical attractiveness. He thought she was exceptionally beautiful, and he felt an undeniable attraction between them. As they spent more time together, They quickly developed a strong connection, effortlessly engaging in friendly conversations over the next few days. Mike and Dahlia's friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship after they spent a weekend together. They quickly realized their feelings for each other went beyond friendship. As a result, they became a committed couple. A few months into their relationship, they stumbled upon an engagement ring store, which led to a conversation about marriage, a topic they had previously discussed. Mike was drawn to the idea of spending his life with Dahlia and decided to purchase a ring, symbolizing his commitment to their future together. Despite their relationship moving quickly, Mike was deeply happy and in love. Before meeting Dahlia, Mike had a troubled past. In 2001, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison in Broward County, Florida, for grand theft, fraud, and false telephone sales. At the time, Mike was struggling with drug addiction and desperation for money, which he later acknowledged was no excuse for his mistakes. Mike served his 2-year sentence and was given 28 years of probation. The court granted Mike a lengthy probation period to give him time to pay back the significant amount of money he owed. However, when Mike returned home, he was unsure of how he would repay the debt. Determined to settle his debt, Mike found a job as a cook at a local restaurant, earning $350 weekly, which was insufficient to make a notable dent in the substantial amount he owed. To improve his financial situation and secure an early release from probation, Mike sought a better-paying job. A friend offered him an office job near his home, allowing him to transition from cooking to email marketing. As Mike and Dahlia started dating, he eventually confided in her about his probation and the limitations it imposed. Mike explained that he required permission to leave the state while on probation. Dahlia, who had a strong desire to travel, expressed her wish to explore the world with Mike. To help Mike become debt-free, Dahlia offered to provide $91,000 if he paid the remaining balance, enabling them to clear the debt and start the life Dahlia had envisioned. Dahlia, a successful real estate agent, was financially stable and able to help her partner Mike pay off his debt and clear his name. Mike consulted his attorney to understand the process, and the attorney advised him to gather the necessary funds to be released from probation. To facilitate the payment, Dahlia and Mike agreed that she would send the money from her Bank of America account to the attorney. Dahlia informed Mike that she had transferred the funds, but when Mike followed up with the attorney, he was told that the payment had not been received. Mike waited a day and then asked Dahlia about the status of the transfer. However, Dahlia insisted that she had sent the money, leaving Mike frustrated and unsure about what was happening. Mike's concern grew, so he contacted his attorney again, only to be told that they still hadn't received anything. Dahlia claimed to have sent the money to the attorney, but couldn't explain the delay. 2 days had passed since the transaction, but the attorney remained without the funds. Mike asked Dahlia for proof of the transaction, needing the receipt to verify the details. However, Dahlia suspected foul play, suggesting the attorney might have stolen the money. She vowed to find the missing sum, while Mike sought to move past the misunderstanding. Meanwhile, a supervisor at the Bon Beach Police Department reached out to Sergeant Whitey Jean for assistance. Sergeant Jean met with a detective working on Dahlia Deo's case. The detective briefed Sergeant Whitey Jean on the case, revealing that Dahlia wanted to hire someone to kill her husband. The detective explained that Dahlia was waiting for a call from the would-be hitman and asked Sergeant Whitey Jean to pretend to be the hitman and arrange a meeting with her. Sergeant Whitey Jean agreed to help with the investigation and took on the role of the hitman. As the hitman, he contacted Dahlia and demanded a $3,000 advance and the key to her house. The detective had requested the key as part of their plan to make Dahlia believe the murder would happen at her home. However, Dahlia was unhappy about the payment demand and called Muhammad, the informant, to express her concerns. During the call, the detective overheard Dahlia's fears and worried that they might have scared her off. They feared that Dahlia might change her mind and find someone else to commit the crime. On August 3, 2009, Dahlia met with Sergeant Whitey Jean, who was posing as a hitman, in a CVS parking lot. However, Dahlia didn't bring the agreed-upon payment, which led Sergeant Whitey Jean to warn her that if he had to wait until after the murder to get paid, she would need to give him $7,000 in cash up front. Sergeant Whitey Jean explained to Dahlia that he would plan the staged break-in and murder of her husband Mike on Wednesday morning, taking advantage of the recent robberies in the area. He outlined his plan to make it look like a legitimate break-in, shooting Mike twice in the head to make it appear like a robbery gone wrong. Sergeant Whitey Jean also told Dahlia that he would contact her a few days after the murder, as he knew the police would be closely monitoring her activities in the aftermath of the crime. Sergeant Whitey Jean cautioned Dahlia that the delay was essential to avoid raising suspicions and maintaining the operation's secrecy. During their conversation, he gave her multiple opportunities to withdraw from the murder-for-hire plot. However, Dahlia expressed her unwavering commitment, stating she was 5,000% certain about her decision to have her husband killed. Dahlia provided Sergeant Whitey Jean with crucial details, revealing that her husband, Mike, followed a predictable morning routine, walking the dog at a specific time and leaving the house unlocked. This information was vital to the success of the plan. She also told the sergeant that she would create an alibi by going to the gym during the murder, ensuring her absence from the house when the crime would take place. The sergeant instructed Dahlia to arrive at the gym by 6 a.m. and informed her that he would enter her home at 6:30 a.m. After speaking with Dahlia, Sergeant Whitey Jean was taken aback by her extraordinary cruelty, having encountered few individuals in his line of work who exhibited a similar level of ruthlessness. The detective wanted to create a fake crime scene at Dahlia and Mike's home to see how Dahlia would react on the day of the alleged hit. To do this, they needed to know Dahlia's whereabouts. At 5:30 a.m., Dahlia told Mike she was going to the gym, which Mike found unusual since she had never gone that early before. However, he didn't think much of it and continued with his morning routine. The detective kept an eye on Dahlia to make sure she went to the gym and went inside. This confirmed that the plan could move forward. But before setting up the fake crime scene, the detective needed to fill Mike Dio in on what was happening. About 30 minutes after Dahlia left for the gym, loud banging noises were heard at Mike and Dahlia's house, prompting Mike to rush to the door. When he opened it, he was surprised to find several police officers standing there. Confused and worried, Mike asked them what was going on. The detective informed Mike that his wife, Dahlia, had tried to hire a hitman to kill him, but the hitman was actually an undercover cop. The entire situation was a setup to look like a murder-for-hire plot. Mike was in shock when the police told him that his wife had hired someone to kill him. The detectives took him to the police station, leaving his home to be staged as a crime scene with fake police tape and lights. The detectives then called Dahlia, telling her that they needed to question her about an incident involving her husband. When she arrived home, she found her house surrounded by police cars and crime scene tape. The detective told her that her husband had been murdered, and she broke down in tears. However, the detective noticed that Dahlia's reaction seemed unusual, as she didn't produce any tears. The detective began questioning Dahlia about suspects, trying to get her to confess to hiring the hitman. Dahlia claimed that her marriage was fine and that Mike's problems with probation and a stock fraud conviction might have led to his murder. Unbeknownst to her, Mike was watching from another room. The detective then revealed that they knew the truth behind the murder and brought in Sergeant Whitey Jean, who Dahlia claimed she didn't know. The detective arrested Dahlia for solicitation of murder, revealing that the hitman was an undercover cop. Mike was given the chance to confront Dahlia, but she refused to admit her guilt. Dahlia's trial took place on April 26, 2011, where Mike testified against her for 3 days. Her defense argued that the entire plot was a publicity stunt for a reality TV show, but Mike denied any involvement. Mike denied any interest in reality TV shows and claimed he had no involvement in Dahlia's alleged plot to kill him. He also stated he had no knowledge of public relations. After the trial, the jury found Dahlia guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder with a firearm, and she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Mike was relieved by the verdict, but also felt a sense of closure, knowing justice had been served. However, Dahlia's attorneys appealed the conviction, citing a juror's remark about Dahlia poisoning Mike's Starbucks drink, which was not presented as evidence during the trial. The appellate court reversed the conviction, and a second trial was held. Despite the state's confidence in their case, the jury reached a hung verdict, resulting in a mistrial. A third trial was held, and Dahlia was again found guilty, this time receiving a 16-year prison sentence. Dahlia's defense team continued to appeal her conviction, but the Florida Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review her case. Her attorneys planned to file a motion with a federal judge to review the third trial for constitutional violations, which would be their last chance to secure a new trial. Despite her conviction, Dahlia has become a respected figure in prison, leading a Bible study group and earning praise from fellow inmates. She is separated from her young son, who lives with his grandmother, and deeply misses being with him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael Haight. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980 in Seattle, Washington, and later moved to Cedar City, Utah, with his family after his father finished dental school. As a child, Michael was very active and enjoyed playing sports like baseball, basketball, and soccer. He also excelled in school and achieved the rank of Eagle Scout. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael worked at a fish plant in Alaska for the summer, where he quickly proved himself as a leader, rising to the position of line manager and overseeing a team of over a dozen men. This experience showcased his strong work ethic and dedication. Michael then embarked on a mission trip to South Brazil with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which deepened his faith and commitment to his religious community. When he returned to the United States, he pursued a business degree at Southern Utah University, graduating in 2004. During his time at the university, Michael met his future wife, Tasha Earle, and they fell in love. They got married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael appeared to be a devoted husband and father, often spending quality time with his family at sports events, school concerts, and working on projects together in the garage. On January 4, 2023, a shocking discovery was made at the Haight residence in Enoch. 8 bodies were found, leaving investigators and neighbors stunned. The events leading up to this gruesome finding began when Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael failed to show up for work. Their concerned colleagues contacted the police to perform a welfare check at the Haight residence. When officers arrived, they knocked on the door but received no response. As they surveyed the property, it seemed empty. Considering the Haight's had 5 children, the police reached out to the Iron County School District to check if any of the kids were in school that day. However, it was found that none of the children were present. Before entering the home, the police cleared the premises to ensure it was safe to do so. After a thorough search, authorities confirmed that no one required medical attention and there was no active threat. The Haight's single-story residence with a basement was declared a crime scene, and detectives arrived shortly after. In the main bedroom, detectives found 4-year-old Gavin lying on his stomach, his head turned to the left, with one arm under his head on a pillow and a blanket covering part of his body. Tasha, Gavin's mother, was also partially covered by the blanket. On the other side of the bed, detectives found an older woman, later identified as Gail Earle, Tasha's mother, lying on her back with her head resting on a pillow and partially covered by a blanket. similar to her daughter and grandson. In Bry's room, the 12-year-old girl was found lying in bed, slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Aman's room, a 7-year-old boy was found lying face down in the corner, without a pillow or blanket. His twin sister Sienna was discovered in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed, with her head on a pillow and covered with a blanket. The eldest child, 17-year-old Macy, was found in her bed, with her head on a pillow and her body covered with a blanket. In the exercise room of the basement, the detectives found Michael Haight lying on top of a sleeping bag. Sadly, all 8 family members were found dead from gunshot wounds. It quickly became clear to the detectives that Michael Haight was the main suspect, and they believed he had killed his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children before taking his own life. When detectives started investigating, a neighbor provided vital information that helped them reconstruct the crime's timeline. The neighbor told police she woke up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom, and as she left her room, heard a loud bang that sounded like fireworks. However, realizing it was after the allowed date for fireworks in the neighborhood, she felt annoyed rather than alarmed by the noise. The neighbor reported hearing an initial loud bang, followed by 2 more in quick succession. Then a short pause, another bang, and a longer pause before the final bang. Based on this testimony and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, the detective inferred that the loud noises heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly connected to the events that unfolded that night, leading them to believe that Michael Haight committed the brutal killings during this time frame. During the investigation into the Haight family murders, detectives discovered a 2020 report from an unnamed individual who had notified the Utah Division of Child and Family Services about abuse in the Haight household. According to the report, 14-year-old Macy had confided in this individual about her fear of her father, sparking a further investigation. The authorities then interviewed Macy and her parents separately. During Macy's interview, she revealed disturbing information. Her father had choked her on multiple occasions, and she lived in fear of being killed by him. She reported that the violent attacks began in 2017 and recounted an incident where her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. Michael Haight denied hurting his daughter when questioned by detectives, passing off the incidents as misunderstandings and attributing his emotional state to his father's recent death and his brother's divorce. He claimed to have taken out his frustrations on his older daughter. Despite this, Tasha chose not to press charges, and the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office also declined to pursue the case, as it did not meet the legal requirements for prosecution. A lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, which indicated that her relationship with Michael was not life-threatening. As a result, victim services were made available to Tasha and her children for several months. Further investigation revealed a different side of Michael, unknown to the community. According to Tasha's friends, they had to speak quietly or turn on the kitchen water when visiting Tasha, as they suspected Michael was monitoring and eavesdropping on their conversations. Tasha's friends would often help her clean the house when they visited, which prevented Michael from finding fault with her. When texting Tasha, her friends noticed that she would respond with brief, positive messages, likely to maintain a positive image in case Michael read them. This suggested that everything was fine in their marriage. The detectives investigating the case discovered that Michael exhibited highly controlling behavior towards Tasha. For instance, he would take away her car keys and phone to restrict her freedom. Another red flag was his overreaction when Tasha bought a $30 rug from Walmart to replace a dirty one, which was a legitimate need. Michael's anger was unwarranted, and he claimed the purchase was excessive. Tasha confided in her friends that her 7-year-old son, Aman, was increasingly imitating Michael's bad behavior. When Tasha gave Aman instructions, he would respond, "That's not my job. which concerned Tasha as it showed his lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. Tasha's friends reported that in 2022, Tasha attempted to prioritize her own well-being by getting her nails done, a rare treat for her given her many responsibilities. However, her husband Michael refused to let her do so, imposing strict limits on her autonomy and freedom. Moreover, Michael frequently disregarded or ignored Tasha's instructions, and their friend Ammon often followed his lead in doing so. Tasha felt more confident in her appearance after indulging herself, and she decided to get her nails done every month. However, Michael was unhappy about this decision and expressed his disapproval, worried about the cost. Tasha explained that it would only cost $25 per month, but Michael was unconvinced, arguing that the money could be better spent on their children. Michael's reaction was rooted in his need for control and sense of financial responsibility towards their family. Around the same time, Tasha started prioritizing her self-care and began losing weight, which had been a sensitive topic for her since Michael had often called her fat and ugly. However, instead of being supportive, Michael became furious and accused Tasha of cheating on him, trying to explain the sudden change in her appearance. Michael's controlling behavior escalated as he tried to manipulate Tasha's weight loss, pleading with her to stop losing weight because he was worried that other men might find her attractive. This demand was driven by his own insecurities and desire for complete control over Tasha's body and behavior. Tasha's friends also told the police about an incident where the kitchen table broke and Tasha needed to buy a new one. However, Michael refused to give her the money, further demonstrating his controlling behavior. Tasha was fed up with the old table and decided to take initiative by refinishing it to make it look better and more functional. However, Michael was unhappy with her decision because she didn't ask for his permission first. Michael was extremely frugal during the holiday season, despite earning a good income. He only gave Tasha $100 for each of their 5 children to buy presents, which was not enough in Tasha's opinion. Tasha always made sure her children had a wonderful Christmas, but Michael refused to provide more funds, claiming that he worked hard for his money and saw no reason to give more to his family. He believed that his income was rightfully his alone. Michael's passion for reducing waste and conserving resources led him to implement strict rules on household habits. He forced Tasha to wash and reuse plastic bags, even if they had been used only once or multiple times. This excessive demand for reusing bags added to Tasha's responsibilities, leaving her feeling burdened and overwhelmed. Michael's controlling behavior extended to every aspect of Tasha's life, including her daily routines. For instance, he demanded that she use baby wipes for cleaning, claiming it was better for the environment and more cost-effective. However, this requirement caused Tasha discomfort, hygiene issues, and unnecessary stress. If Tasha failed to follow Michael's instructions, she would face severe consequences, which he made clear would lead to serious trouble. This threat instilled fear and submission in Tasha, leaving her no choice but to obey Michael's demands. Tasha confided in her friends that while Michael had been cruel to her throughout their marriage, he had never directed this cruelty towards their children until the late 2010s. However, over time, the abuse towards their daughter Macy escalated, driving her to consider suicide. Michael had unrealistically high expectations for his daughter Macy, demanding she earn perfect grades despite her struggles, which were exacerbated by the emotional burden of his abusive behavior. This pressure was crushing for Macy. Macy's friends shared a disturbing incident with the detective. One evening, Michael returned home to find Macy comforted by her mother. He became enraged and ordered Macy to clean her room. This event left Macy deeply disturbed, remembering the hatred and evil she saw in her father's eyes. The detectives also discovered an incident where 7-year-old Briley disobeyed Michael while playing with a changing table. Michael responded by blaming his wife Tasha for their children's behavior, calling them the worst and most disrespectful in the world. He then humiliated Tasha, calling her fat and ugly in front of their 5 children. This painful incident prompted Tasha to plan her escape and file for divorce after 20 years of marriage. Tasha realized she had to leave her husband Michael after witnessing his abusive behavior and lack of self-control. She knew staying in the marriage would negatively impact her children, and their well-being was more important than her marital commitment. In December 2022, Tasha filed for divorce, but asked for the papers to be delivered after Christmas to give her children one last normal holiday before the separation. When Michael received the papers, he tried to act normal, but Tasha saw through it. He told her to leave the children behind, but she refused, taking them to her mother's home in Lynn, Utah. Michael showed up at his mother-in-law's house, trying to convince Tasha to go for a ride with him, but she refused, sensing danger. After filing for divorce, Tasha's mother moved in to support her and the children. However, Michael's actions worsened the situation. He refused to leave the family home, instead moving into the basement. Tasha discovered he had secretly transferred $220,000 from their children's savings accounts without her knowledge or consent. She also found that her inherited firearms were missing, leaving her family vulnerable. The couple's children, Macy and Briley, were affected by the constant drama at home. Macy had a secret phone to record her father's outbursts as evidence for the divorce, while Briley found solace at a neighbor's house. Both girls were relieved about their parents' divorce. On January 3, 2023, Tasha met with her attorney, expressing concerns about her divorce and Michael's volatile behavior. Although she had relocated him to the basement, the attorneys pressed her about feeling safe. Tasha reassured them she never feared for her or her children's well-being, but in hindsight, her optimism was tragically misplaced. A disturbing discovery emerged from the digital evidence found on the family's computers and cell phones. Just days before the tragic shooting, Michael made a series of concerning Google searches on December 30th at 10:41 p.m. These searches focused on firearms and shooting-related topics, revealing his sinister intentions. The search results showed Michael had asked alarming questions, such as the loudness of a 9mm gunshot and what a gunshot sounds like. Before taking his own life, Michael wrote a note expressing his desire to end the controlling behavior he felt he was subjected to by his wife. He stated that he couldn't handle the situation for another day and wanted to escape the manipulation. Michael's note conveyed deep frustration and desperation, as he repeatedly asked for help but felt ignored. He emphasized his determination not to be a burden to society. The details of this case have left many in shock, revealing a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence. Michael's actions were premeditated and calculated, as he carefully planned the murders to catch his wife and children off guard.